Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the business planning for the North Texas, New Mexico, and Memphis region. My name is Tara Stark, and I'm coming to you from Weatherford, Texas, representing the KWDFW Metro Southwest Market Center. And we are so thrilled today, so pumped, so excited because we have the one and the only Cody Gibson. Yay, Cody's in the house. So today it's just an honor and a privilege to have you here, Cody. Welcome to Texas, North Texas, New Mexico, and to Memphis. We just can't believe what a privilege and an honor it is to have you. Cody, for those of you that don't know, is the owner and CEO of the Portland Real Estate Group and the United Home Group. He founded that group in 2011, and since that time, it's currently operating in 96 states, or actually it's 96 market centers, 22 states, and he has over 160 different partners. And so in 2019, Cody had over 1,026 sales. He's projected to put over 1,400 homes under contract in 2020. And he actually once put 146 homes under contract in 1 month. That is just unbelievable. I can't believe it. So we get to learn from the best here. Cody is also a MAPS Bold coach. He has been one for 10 years now. And he's an operating partner of 2 Keller Williams offices. And he's been in real estate for 20 years. So Cody, if there's something unique and cool that we would need to know about you today before we get started, what would that be?
The only thing I would add to that would be I love long walks on the beach and turkey sandwiches. And I'm really excited for COVID to go away someday. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Those things like that pretty much sums it all up.
That sums it all up. Absolutely. Well, 2021 is going to be an amazing year. We're looking super forward to that. And I just can't tell you again what an honor and privilege it is to have you here with us today. And without further ado, please take it away. And we look forward to learning so much from you and what we can be inspired and envision for our new year coming up.
Wow, thank you so much for the opportunity. All right, so Lacey's going to get my slide deck queued up. And what I want you to do when you're going through this, at home or at your computers or whatever it is, right, is a couple things. Number one, I want you to remember that the idea behind business planning is simply to give you the best possible opportunity for success next year. That's it. Like, that's it in a nutshell. It is not set in stone. It is not set it and forget it. It is not, hey, once I do this, this is it forever. It's none of those things. That's not what it is. It's simply it's almost like a moment in time where you just stop for a second and you step out of whatever transactional problems and issues and challenges. We all have them, right? And you just say, cool, all that stuff's going to be there in a couple of hours. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to take a pause and I'm going to think, what am I going to do with all this next year? It's really easy. It's so easy to lose sight of the forest through the trees, right? It's so simple to get wrapped up in what's happening, to forget to step out of it. And I've been there. When we go through this today, we used to teach the business planning clinic, in the early days when I was first teaching it, like in 07, 08, it was like a full 2-day event in person, obviously. And it was like 14 hours, right? And then we kind of cut it down to about a day. And honestly, it wasn't how deep you want to go. Today, we're going to go about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, somewhere in there. And of course, part of that is simply because of the logistics of being able to present this way. The reality that, quite frankly, you don't want to stare at a screen for 7 hours, and I don't want to stare at a camera for 7 hours. So I'm going to give you the gist of what needs to happen. Though while you're doing it, I want you to think, when and what am I going to do to make sure that I actually fill everything out? Like, you've got the material that's been emailed to you, you have the full material, and then you actually have the shorter packet, if you will, that you would actually fill out your true business plan in. What I've learned is this: junk in, junk out, over and over and over. I've done this for years and years and years and years. And I've written business plans that seemed great that I never really touched. And I've written business plans that weren't that good, though I followed them and they were awesome. So my push for you would be this. I want you to think throughout the next couple of hours together, all right, when am I going to complete this? When am I going to truly do it? Now, if we were sitting in a room, I would say, great, we'll take 15 minutes. I want you to fill this out. It doesn't work like that when you're doing this. That's not the play for this. Though I am going to give you a couple of opportunities where I'll say, listen, I want you to stop for a second, and we're just going to take 2 minutes. I mean, in a distance learning environment like this, if I said we're going to take 15 minutes, you'd get off into something. So would I. Like, that's just the way it looks. So I'm going to say, let's take 2 minutes. I'll step off the camera. What I want you to do is I want you to be on XYZ page. I just want you to start. Like, what I've learned is that if you'll just start, you'll circle back to it. Like, you'll come back to it tonight or tomorrow morning over a cup of coffee, or you'll set a time and say, listen, like, one of the things I like to do every year is I like to get away just for like one day, and I'll go stay at some cool hotel. I'll go stay somewhere that I haven't been before, or maybe somewhere I love going, and I'll just spend some time. I'll take a bunch of paper, I'll write, I'll business plan, like I'll do those things. So it could be that. So my goal for you when you're actually writing it today with me is I just want you to start, just begin. Like, if you can fill out a line or two, great. You'll come back to it. I promise that you will. So, all right, let's jump right into it. So Lacey, I need to be able to advance. So I don't know if I need to click it first. All right, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so we've got 1 through 7. Obviously, we'll go through each of them together. And what I'll do is I'll slow down a few times, and I'll talk a little bit more, and I'll speed up a few times, and I'll give you more and more and more of what matters the most about what you're doing with your business plan. I'm also going to walk you through what Gary and his team have done to rewrite or update like these 7th levels, right? Like level 1 and 2 and 3. And there's some really great changes, especially at level 4, 5, and 6. So we'll go through that. And then also we'll talk about, of course, the economic model, the lead gen model, the budget model, and the org model. And I'll tell you along the way, like the way that I put these into play. And I'll also tell you along the way, like when it's more and less important. I need you to hear my words. It's always important. Though there's certain times that you look down at your business and you go, you know what? Like right now, this is important, though this is like monumental. I cannot live without this, and that's okay. And I'll tell you some times in your business that you're going to struggle with that and when to do it. So let's get into it. All right, so we'll talk about understanding the power of the 5 fundamental models. We'll create the business plan, and then we'll execute the plan. Of course, that's what you're doing next year. Now, time out for a moment. One thought that you might have right now is this. As you're building this for 2021, I would really push you. I was having a conversation with Gary, that's probably like 6 weeks. I don't know, it's longer than that now. It's probably like 10 weeks ago now. And we were talking about something. And he said, I'm not even thinking about 2021. I'm really thinking about 2024 and 2025. I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you know, to a degree, 2021 is kind of going to do its thing. He said, I could probably have some input to it and I could sway it. He goes, but I don't know that I can create it. He said, I can totally create the way the business looks. And of course, he's talking about Keller Williams. He goes, I can totally create the way the business looks in 2024 or 2025. 2021, though, is kind of based on what you did in 2020 and what you did in 2019. I don't want to say it's done, though it's already heavily influenced. Now, take that comment from Gary Keller, and I want you to loop it into your own business. Look at it like this. If you've never done like a cool geographic farm, you've never had like an amazing farm of 10,000 homes that you mail, and there's 100 ways to do this, right? Or maybe you've never had like a sociographic farm and you've always wanted to have one. You don't have one today. I don't know that in the course of 2021, you're going to begin one, start doing it, learn what works, what doesn't, punt, change, get used to it, and then have one rocking. Though you totally can by 2024 or 2025. And before I move on, I want you to write this down. We tend to underestimate what we can do in 4 or 5 years, and we completely overestimate what we can do in 1 year. So I want you to keep that perspective. If I'm you, I'm going to be building out this business plan. Like, I mean, I'm in the same season you are right now. I'm looking at next year, of course, though I'm really looking at 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years out. So it's almost like you could build 2021, though I would push you, why not overlay 2025? Like, unless you're going to get out of the business between now and then, which is totally fine, though, why not overlay 2025 over 2021 and be like, all right, here's what I'm doing in 21, but here's where I want to be in 25. And then you allow those years to catch up to it. That's what the smartest and richest people do. So do the same thing as them. That's what modeling is, right? Like, modeling is looking at what someone does and then saying, great, I can do that too. So models and mindset is section 2. Think about a stable or an unstable foundation. And there's no way that we can have this dialogue today without stopping here first. If you take a look at the triangle, right, you've got models at the bottom, creativity on top. When you look at unstable, like we just took it and we flipped it over, I need you to make peace with the fact that if you're a real estate agent, you probably have a certain thread that runs through you that says creativity, creativity. I do too. We're probably cut from a similar cloth. Like that's who strikes out and says, great, I'm going to go become a real estate agent. Like we're birds of a feather. Like that's who we are. And I need you to be willing to almost hold yourself accountable and force yourself not to do it. Just force yourself. Models are boring. Let me say it again. Models are boring. I want you to write it down wherever you're at. Models are boring. You know what's also boring? Incredibly successful businesses. You know what's also boring? Incredible profit. Those are boring things, and I need you to make peace with that. Gary looked at me one day and he said, the more boring you can make your business, the more money your business is going to make you. When you think about models and creativity, I need you to hold yourself accountable to say, listen, I want to go do ABC, and I'm going to do it based on a model. That does not mean that you can't be creative. It means you better be creative. Though if you're looking for the answer, the creativity only comes after the model. So it's kind of like if I were to teach you and say, listen, if you said, Cody, I want to go and sell 50 homes a year, right? You're at 20 right now, no problem. Here's the 8 things I'm going to have you do to go from 20 units to 50 units. It'd be like this. You could not step out of the 8 things that I told you to go do. You couldn't. If you did, we can't talk anymore. If you did, we don't coach anymore. If you did, you're out. Like you're off. You're off the team. You're out of here. Though the moment you hit 50, then you're cool. Totally fine. You could choose to hang on to the models. You could choose to be creative. You could look down and go, I've always hated doing it like this anyway, so I'm going to change this part, but keep this part. That's totally fine. But you would have the perspective of achieving it. Once you achieve it, you're cool. Add all the creativity you want. What you'll find is that most of the time, once you achieve it, you don't want the creativity anymore. Like once you achieve it, you're totally cool with the models and the systems. That's how it happens. That's what happens 99% of the time. Now, when you think about breaking through to higher achievement, no matter what you do and everything you do, you're going to have some level of natural ability. And let me get caught up with where you're at on the paper here. No matter what happens, there's always going to be a natural ability. Now, natural ability can only take you so far. Now, there are some people that seemingly their natural ability elevator just goes to the 100th floor. Like they just rock. Everything they do tends to work. Like everything they touch, tends to turn to gold. Like all their ideas tend to work. I don't like those people either, by the way. Like that's never been me. I've always been the guy that was like, here's a great plan. And then it fails 10 times. Though you can't beat somebody who doesn't stop. You can't beat somebody who doesn't give up. That which can only bend will not break. And that's who I've been my whole life. And it's probably who you are. You're always going to have a natural ability. When your natural ability gets you to some ceiling of achievement, and you're always going to find it, it's always going to end up there. What you use there is you use foundational models to break through and go to the next. Now, whatever the next is, you're going to hit another ceiling of achievement. And you're probably going to have to use some creativity. And you're going to go, well, I'm not sure what to do. That's okay. Let's try some things. Then you're going to have improved models. You go back to the model that you had and you make it better. You make it smarter. You say, all right, well, I know this now, or this has changed now. Think about how much COVID has changed the way we do business. Think about how different things look. Think about how different homes might look in 12 months or 24 months in the building process. Think about how builders or developers might change or shift or reimagine the way that looks, right? The whole thing, we don't know. The whole thing's different. Nothing's the same. Then you break through again. And of course, as you see, the cycle goes on and on and on. So there's lots of room for creativity. We want you to be creative, but I want you to write this down. This would be the easiest way for me to say it this way. And here's how I look at the world. So you could input whatever number you want here, but here's Cody's number. Until I'm earning $250,000 a year, I haven't earned the right to be creative. Let me say it again. And this is mine. So you use your number. Your number could be lower or higher, your choice. But the way I look at the world and the way that I've held myself responsible to this is until I'm making $250,000 a year, I don't get to be creative. And the reality is you don't need any creativity to make 250. Now, to make 2.5 million or 6 million or 10 million, yeah, you're gonna probably have to use some creativity. Like I remember the first year that my expansion business broke $5 million in GCI. Like that was a lot of money. And we were being incredibly creative to get there, like incredibly creative. And I've got friends today that'll hit 12 and $14 million in GCI. My group won't this year, like we'll probably be 7.5, like somewhere in that range. But creativity plays a role there. But for me, I don't think you need any creativity in real estate to make 250 a year. I think you could run a simple playbook of 10 or 12 things, do them over and over and over again and make 250 a year. And when you're making 250 a year, you could choose to do anything you want. You're going to be able to pay for anything you want, do what you want to do, and then you could choose how much creativity you want. So again, like that's my number. You do with that whatever you want, but that's how I see the world. Then I want you to think about thinking like a millionaire real estate agent. So think like an MREA. So the 8 or the 9 are right here, right? Like think powered by a big why. Now we're going to talk about these in depth and go through them a little bit together, though I just want to give you like an overview, right? Big goals, big models, value, customer service, and experience. And what I want you to do is I want you to write experience. I want you to write experience, put a question mark next to it. I believe at the end of the day, you're going to eventually be paid based on the level of questions that you ask and the level of questions that you ask even of yourself. Now, the issue around experience is this. You have to, like, what should keep you up at night? So Gary had me on stage last year, had to be last year at family, I think it was family reunion. And we did an interview. It was me, him, Josh, and Brian Gubernick was on stage. And Gary said something, he goes, what keeps you up at night? And I said, what keeps me up at night right now and what scares me right now is I don't know what the consumer wants as an experience. Like as it relates to real estate, I don't know. But I do know the consumer's in charge. The realtor is not. The consumer is in charge. That's why we've moved so heavily based into the internet. That's why we've moved so heavily based into right now. But that's how our whole world is, right? But what I want you to imagine is this. What experience do the people that I work with, what are they going to demand? And then how do I tailor my business to fulfill the experience they want? But I think you should go to bed every night asking, what experience do the consumers want? And I think you should wake up every day thinking, what experience do the consumers want? And it's not yesterday's real estate model. It's not. It has to be tomorrow's real estate model. That's why things have dramatically changed. They've dramatically shifted so hard. COVID's just helped push the process a little bit. Big technologies just helped push the process a little bit. But you should be worried. I'm worried. Like, what's the experience? What's the experience that they want? Because they're in charge today. Like, we don't get to be in charge. I'll circle back to this, by the way. Competitively and strategically, action, accountability, talent, systems, and standards, knowledge and skills, persistence and resilience. And then number 9, of course, is to think profit. Now, when you look at the screen, the ones at the top are foundational. Big why, big models, customer service, experience, all those things. The rest support the top 3. Now, of the top 3, we would even say the first 2, big why and big goals and big models, they're really the driver. Like they drive everything. Now, when you think about it, what do you want it to look like? You get to design it, but you got to design it backwards. You can't design it forwards. All right. So thinking powered by a big why. When you think about a big why, probably one of the biggest challenges I've had around being within KW. And I love our company, love it. But I have struggled, man, I have struggled with this big why. I have sat in rooms, I've stood in the front of rooms and talked about big whys. And yet in the back of my mind been like, what does that even mean for me? Like, what is it? Here's some things I've learned around the big why for you. And I'm going to give you just some ideas and then you can do with them what you want. Number 1, you are not stuck with yours. When it changes and if it changes, you're good. You're good. You are not stuck. This is not written in stone. This is not a tombstone. This is not a gravestone. This is like, you're not stuck with this. Number 2, it's okay if you don't know. It's okay if you say, I'm not sure right now. It's okay. By the way, everybody knows something about their big why. So when Gary used to teach big why, he would say, listen, the easiest way to find your big why is to have like 10 or 12 itty bitty whys, like little things that go, well, there's this and there's this and there's this. And until I have some giant big why, I'm just going to use these 8 or 10 little ones and put them all together. But you hear people say, well, my big why is blank. And they say it and they're so eloquent with it. And it's almost like, I don't know about you, when I used to hear it, like I would feel bad about myself and I'd be like, how come I don't have that? How come I can't say it like that? It's okay if it changes. This doesn't keep you back. You don't need any dogma around it. If you know what yours is and you could say it in a sentence or two, awesome, great. If you have to write it on a piece of paper and you're like, listen, I don't really know, and it's not very eloquent, it's kind of clunky. I've got 8 or 10 things that all together kind of equal a big why. Awesome, you're in the right spot. You're not doing this wrong at all. Think big goals and big models. We want you to think about setting your 1-year net income goal based on your someday goal. Let me say that again. We want you to set your 1-year net income goal based on your someday goal. What do you want it to be? Like, how big are you willing to think? How big are you willing to push? And I'm going to give you a quick story around this. There was in 2011, right? In fact, Lacey, can we go in and out of the PowerPoint on here? Because that'll change the screen on their end, right? So let's go ahead and take the PowerPoint off just for a moment. In 2011, it'll be like maybe a minute and a half, we'll put it back up. In 2011, I just know you don't like, I don't love staring at a PowerPoint slide forever. In 2011, I was in 2 locations for expansion. And I remember I was going to this event and we had created like a brochure, and part of the brochure talked about like goals, right? And so I put in the brochure that we were going to be in 40 cities by 2020. And this was like 2011, right? Like the end of 2011. And 40 seemed like a long way away. And it was like, I was scared. It was a scary number. By the way, I was at 2. So 38 more was a whole lot. And people always think that when somebody has a giant goal and then they eventually hit it, that somehow they did it differently than you did. I don't know anybody who's done that. Here's what happens, or here's what happened. In 2016 or 2017, somewhere in there, I was going to another event and it was similar to the one that I was at like 5 years before. And we had done another brochure. We updated a bunch of stuff. And at the time, the person that worked with me in my office said, hey, here's this part of the brochure. We got to change it. And I was looking at it. I said, what? She goes, yeah, this says 40 cities by 2020. And it's like the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And she goes, but we're not in 40, we're in like 73. And I remember like I stopped and I looked at it and I was like, wow. Not only did we hit the goal of 40 and hit it early, man, we ran right past it. Let me tell you the moral to that story. By the way, I kept it. I said, no, I don't want to change it. I said, I know it'll be like confusing to people, but it's my reminder. Like it's my reminder, and I want you to write this down. It's my reminder that even when I think I'm thinking big, if I haven't been there yet, I have no idea what big even means. Because I thought 40 was huge, and it felt like it was a mile away, like 100 miles away from 2. By the way, people always look at something and they go, oh, well, they must have had like some amazing spiritual event to come up with this goal. No, not at all. You know why I chose 40 cities by 2020? Was because I was going to turn 40 years old in 2020. And I thought, well, that's cool. Like, that'll be like a cool story. I'll be in 40 cities and I'm 40 years old. Like, that's just like, that was the reality of it. And I didn't know how to get there anyway. And I remember thinking, well, if we go for 40 and we're at 35 or 32, we're at 2 right now. Nobody at that time had more than 3 or 4 locations. And I was like, that must be huge. Well, today we're in 96. By the way, at one point we were in like 115 or 118. And then we contracted. We had some problems, had some challenges, blew up our model a little bit. Remember what I said, that everything's going to hit a ceiling of achievement, and then you have to come back and you have to fix it. You have to come back and say, great, who do we need to be? By the way, the business changed. Like from 2012 to 2015, pretty much business as usual. 2015, 2016, lead generation for our style changed dramatically. Then you had to go back and fix it. So Lacey, if you can put the back up. The biggest piece I want you to take from that story again is this. If you've never been, you have no idea what big even means. So just be willing to throw something out there and then start working towards it. I remember Gary telling me once, he's like, listen, I never knew, he goes, I never really gave a lot of thought to how many countries Keller Williams could be in. He said, I was clear that I wanted to be able to go international, but I didn't know, like, was it going to be 20 countries or 50 countries? He said, I just knew that I wanted it to go there. He said, I also knew that before we ever left the United States, he said, I was making all the money I needed to make. But the people in my business within Keller Williams, they needed their opportunities, which meant we had to be able to expand. So I need you to think, if you're going to build a giant business, like if we're just talking business today, we're not talking about how to sell more homes. We're not talking about how to convert more buyers. I mean, those things are important. But if we're talking for a few minutes about truly building a business, you're going to have to deal with people. And you're going to have to build a business that's so big that people don't outgrow your business, that they don't have to leave it all the time. The challenge is when your vision is one size and the people that work with you, their visions become bigger than that, that's when they continue to have to leave you. Now, to think that big is scary. And I'm with you. I'm with you. Number 5, I want you to think action and accountability. This is where you set up a system for accountability. Now, whatever that looks like for you, right? Like accountability for one doesn't look the same to somebody else. I do know that accountability is not a dirty word. I do know that. I do know that nobody succeeds at their highest possible level without accountability. And however that looks, whether you play games around it, whether you hire a maps coach, whether you, I mean, whatever it is that you do, like you've got to do something. Here's the question though, is what I've been doing getting me what I want? If the answer is yes, then you don't need to change a thing. But if the answer is anything but yes, you might need to change everything. Or you have to look at yourself and say, listen, the goals that I'm saying are my goals really aren't. I'm not that attached. It's like that person, I mean, that says, listen, I'm going to go do blank, blank, blank. And then they don't do it. And you go, well, you're not, I mean, you're lying to yourself. And I need you to hear this. There's been plenty of times in my life that I've set out a goal or said something only because it sounded amazing. I wasn't even attached to it. It just sounded good to say. And you realize one day, I'm lying to myself. Like if you really care about it, think about something in your life that you truly, truly, truly care about, that really matters. What obstacle holds you back? Like what really keeps you from getting there? When you really care, I'll bet you can't even think of something. You just go, no, don't know how to fix it, but I'm already walking through it. Don't know how to get around it, but I'm already going. Like I'll move heaven and earth. Like I'll just do anything, right? Walk over broken glass if I have to. The opposite's also true. If you're not that attached to it, then any little thing will stop you. It's like any little speed bump might as well just be a roadblock. It might as well just be a brick wall. And here's what I do. When I find myself stopping at speed bumps, when I find myself allowing things to keep me from going where I said I wanted to go, man, I go internal first. And I begin to ask questions like, are you actually committed? Like, do you really want to do this? Or do you want to do this? Two different things. I was talking, well, we'll come back. I'll share that story later. The 411. Once you figure out these 9 ways of thinking, then you begin to fill out a 411. Now, the 411 is going to be your simplest tool of accountability. It's not a to-do list. It's a focusing tool. Now, you can go on Connect and you can watch videos about the 411. You can go on YouTube and you can watch some of us doing classes on the 411. Like that's not necessarily what we're doing today. But I want to tell you a story around the 411. When I started coaching with Gary, he goes, hey, show me your 411. And I was like, well, and he goes, you don't have one. And I said, well, like, I mean, I could fill one out. Like I know it, right? And I'd been teaching it for so long and doing it, but it had moved up here instead of paper. And he said, that's okay. He said, that's the natural progression for almost everybody. And he then said, what system would you like to use? And I kind of gave some ideas and he said, no problem. And he said, I want you to write down how much money you made last year. He goes, I'll do the same. And so like we both wrote down like how much money we made, right? And he put it across the table towards me and I opened his note, which you could imagine was a lot bigger than mine. And he goes, and he kind of smiled. He goes, are you okay if we use my systems? And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Great point, Gary. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm in. Let's use yours. The reason the 411 is going to work for you is that it keeps you absolutely focused. Now, if you've been doing a 411 for years, awesome, you already know this. If you're like the other 99% of us who haven't been doing it for years, or you've done it, stopped, done it, stopped, welcome to the club. Like, that's called real life. Here's what I've learned around the 411. Every time I've done one with somebody long-term as a coach, the first 3 months or 4 months almost don't even matter. I just need you to do it so you get in the habit of doing it. It doesn't even need to be that good. It's kind of like when you first start working out and you're first going to the gym, your form's not even that important. We can deal with form later. Let's just get in the gym and get moving weights around. Let's just do that. And then over the course of time, we'll come back and say, hey, you ought to lift it this way. You'll get better results. So for the 411, for those that are being like, all right, I'm just going to recommit to it. And sometimes it's just a recommitment. It's like, all right, I'm going to go back to it. I don't have a better plan. Like, if you've got a better process than this that keeps it all on one piece of paper, by the way, what I like about it the most is it's just one sheet. Now, one trick to this that most people overlook, and then we'll move on. One trick to this, you've got annual, monthly. You probably have 5 or 6 things in each. If you've got like 20 annual goals, that's probably too many things. That doesn't mean that you can't have them. It does mean you probably can't focus on 20. So 5 to 7 annual goals tends to be a really solid number. Maybe you're a higher achiever and you could do 8 or 9. I've seen nobody run like 20 or 25 and actually knock them down. So definitely below 10. The rest are just important. Monthly goals, again, maybe 8, maybe 10, sometimes a little bit more than annual. Then it's a week, and it's 1 week at a time. And this is the biggest mistake people make on the 411 is like, we'll take a monthly goal and we'll keep it easy, right? They go, cool, 8 transactions this month. By the way, 8 transactions is easy. It takes 0 creativity. Let me say it again. It takes 0 creativity for you to hit 8 transactions a month. Let me say that one more time just to make sure that you catch me. It doesn't take creativity to sell 8 homes a month. You could sell 8 homes a month, 96 homes a year with pure models. No creativity, just saying, listen, what are the 8 or 10 or 12 things I got to do? Run that play, come back, run it again, come back, run it again, come back, run it again. Like, do you get my outlook on this? By the way, 100 transactions is going to be a hell of an income for you. It's a great income. And by the way, from 100, you can do 1,000. The only difference between 20 or 30 transactions a year and 1,000 transactions a year are models and systems. That's it. And just people. That's it. Over and over and over again. All right. So back to what I'm talking about. Let's say that you had 8 transactions a month and that was your goal. Again, no creativity needed. You could model right to that. Easy peasy. Follow the rule book. Black and white. Don't need to be creative. The mistake people make is they grab their 411 and they go, great, week 1 is 2, week 2 is 2, week 3 is 2, week 4 is 2. Life doesn't work that way. Now, you could fill out week number 1 and say 2, that's fine. And if you hit 3, then you could choose for week 2 to be 1, or you could choose for week 2 to stay at 2, that's fine. But if you hit 1 on week 1, which is more commonly what happens, then you have to say, great, all right, so week 2 has to be 3 units. Now, by the way, this is where you learn real fast. Are you working at a goal level that you should be? Let me give you this real quick. Like, if I'm coaching you one-on-one and we're going after 8 transactions a month, and on week number 1, you're at 1, and we go, great, let's load that one on next week. That's fine. We just got to, we're probably close on 1. We got to do 3 next week. And you're like, all right, so week number 2, you do 1 again. I'm like, all right, now we got 2. We got to take that one and load it on week 3. Now on week 3, you got to go knock down 4 units. What's the probability of somebody who's done 1 unit a week for 2 weeks to go do 4 units in 1 week? And I'm not talking about a fluke, like everyone's had a fluke, right? Even the agent who sells 10 homes a year has one day they sold 2 homes. Like, of course, it's just not repeatable or duplicatable. And if we're going to talk about businesses, we want to talk repeatable, duplicatable, sustainable. I'm going to start pushing back and saying, listen, pal, we're at week number 3. You got to go knock down 4. Chances are that person sells what? Another 1. And we go, all right, so now we need 5 in week 4. I need you to catch me on this. Do you realize how much pressure that creates? And do you realize how demoralizing that becomes? Because then you get like 8 or 9 weeks in and you finally look at yourself and you go, you know what? I'm so far behind, I can't catch up anyway. And when that happens, you stop using all the tools and systems. You stop using the models because it's not fun anymore. Like you look down, I mean, no one wants to be somewhere that they're so far from hitting their goal, they might as well just quit. Like they don't even have a shot anymore. No one wants to be that way. And we've all been there. So what I would do in that position, remember I made the comment a minute ago, we're going to find out in just a matter of a few weeks if you're working on a goal that you should be. Now let me come back and clean that statement up. The agent who sells 3 homes or 4 homes in a month, but they're working at 8 or 10 units a month and they're nowhere near it, by the time they get 3 months deep, they're so far behind they've given up. I would tell you as a coach, that's too far for them to reach right now. Remember what I said? We overestimate what we can do in a year, underestimate what we can do in 3 years or 4 years. If I'm coaching somebody who's probably a 3 unit or a 4 unit a month person, my job is going to be to get them to selling 6. Like, let's just take the next step. Let's bump it up a little bit to 6. Because if you're going to double or if you're going to triple, your business is going to fall off the wheels anyway. Like your wheels are going to fall off the business anyway. So let's have a sustainable number that we can get to. And maybe we spend this next year getting used to 6 units a month or 7 units a month. Then when we go to 9 units or 10 units, it's just another little jump. The challenge is what happens. And when we get into business planning season, people look at where they are and they set a number that is so high for the next year and so big. And they're like, and they're proud of their number. I understand it. I get it. But maybe that's your 4-year number. Maybe that's what Gary Keller is talking about when he says, man, I'm really focused on 2024 and 2025. 2021 is going to kind of run the way it's already running based on what I've already got. Maybe that would become your business plan. I've just seen it too many times. Too many times I've seen somebody set a number so big, come nowhere near hitting it, that they're disappointed, hate it, and they give up on themselves. And that's no good place to be. All right, so the foundational model, the MREA, like you know it, right? It's the 3 L's. It's listings, leverage, leverage. Listings, leverage, leverage. We used to talk about leads, listings, and leverage. By the way, leads still matter. Like you have to have them, but it's going to be leverage, leverage. Now it could be leveraging your leads. All right, so the five fundamental models, and I'll come back and we'll keep bouncing around, but the 5 fundamental models, you got the economic model, lead gen model, budget model. Any business you want to run needs these 5 models. Organizational model, and then the 5th would be expansion model. And expansion would be if you want to do more of them, have more locations, like even if you were to open a coffee shop in your city, what's the economic model? And that would be to achieve the amount of net income that you're after, what's left over for you. Then you got to go, great, what's my lead gen model? How am I going to get people to walk into my coffee shop? And you're going to have X number of leads or X number of people that could or would walk in. It looks the same for a real estate business. And then any business needs a budget model. Like, where does the money go? And I have struggled with this. By the way, I'll give you some stories when we hit the budget that hopefully will give you some ideas of how you could run your budget a little cleaner and a little leaner and do it more often. I used to hate the budget, hated it. I don't today. It's the best tool I have, but I used to hate it. Spend X amount of money in specific areas to support the effort, right? It makes perfect sense. Number 4, though, is the organizational model. So we call it like the org model or org chart, right? When and who to hire, unless you're going to do this alone forever. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of my friends that say, Cody, I don't want to hire a bunch of people. I really want to sell 70 homes a year. And I could do that with a part-time transaction coordinator. 100%. You could sell 70 homes a year, have a part-time TC, and maybe a couple of agents in your office who help you out when you have overflow. And you don't have to have a great big team. You don't have to do that. I mean, I don't want you to chase things just because people are doing it. Gary said from stage, it was probably 2 or 3 mega camps ago, he was interviewing a bunch of big teams like he always does. And then he brought out a whole bunch of people that were solopreneurs that were running incredible businesses. And he was asking, he was like, hey, do you want to have like a giant team of 20 people or 40 people or 200 or whatever, right? Do you want to do that like so-and-so was an hour ago? And they went, no, I don't. Like, I don't have, that's not my desire. And he gave him a high five and said, good for you. Like, you're running the business the way that you want to run it. So I say all of that to say this. Sometimes you hear people talk about like the 7 levels, almost like you have to do it. Almost like if you don't do it, there's something wrong with you. Man, there ain't nothing wrong with you. Nothing. I just want you to choose where you want to be and then get there. And then once you're there, if it remains that, great. If it changes, that's great too. All right. Number 5 is the expansion model, like when to expand if you choose to, right? Like you would apply systematized business models in the additional locations. And we'll talk about that for a few minutes. All right. So here's what we'll do. We are 40 minutes in, and I want you to think for a second, like what's one aha that you've had? If you want to throw it in the chat box, that'd be great. Like I won't be able to see it on my end until we end and I go back through and I read them all, but they do help everybody else. Like when you share an aha, someone sees it and they go, that's great. I learned from it too. All right. Economic model. When you think about the economic model, this is where we're going to have to, like, we're going to dive into some of the numbers just for a moment. When you take a look at the screen, you have a net income at the very top. What we would say is about 40%. Then you have operating expenses at 30, you have cost of sales. I'm going to give you what all this stuff means. And a bunch of you already know it if you've already been around it, but I'm just gonna give you like an overview of it. Then you have total GCI, which is of course your gross commission income, divided by average commission amount equals units sold. So this would be like the mathematical equation to get there. When you look at it though, if we wanted to make $1 million, like we'll just pluck that number out like from the MREA, the $1 million mark would make it about 2.5 in GCI. If you make 2.5 in GCI, it allows you to spend 30% in operating expenses and 30% in cost of sales. Now, cost of sales is almost always what you pay your brokerage, franchise fees, cap, and salespeople. Everything else is going to be operating expense. So I want you to remember that. People get them confused and get them mixed up regularly. That gives you about $750 on each, 30 and 30. Now, does it have to be this way? No. Are you stuck with this? No. Maybe yours is a little bit richer. Maybe yours is a little bit leaner. That's completely okay. And by the way, in a few minutes, I'll share with you at some of the lower levels, like maybe you only want to make 500 or do you realize what I just said? Like you and I live in an industry where I could be talking about this and the words fall out of my mouth, if you only want to make $500,000. Oh. What industry in the world looks like ours? I never went back to school after the 9th grade. They don't make people like me doctors. They don't make people like me surgeons, right? I have a 9th grade education, and that's as far as I went. But I found my way into real estate with this incredible no ceiling of achievement. Like I can make as much as I want to make. I can go as many places as I want to go. I can do as many things as I want to do. That's why I love our industry so much. Now, the challenge is it's just as simple to make 0 as it is to make 500. It's just as simple to be worried about bills month in and month out and struggle with money. It's just as easy to do that as it is to make $500,000 a year. All right, so let's do the math. If we think about it, we'll take an average commission amount for the country of 7,100, right? Just you use yours, but I'm just using super averages. We're going to assume about 350 units. Now, if you're going to do 350 units, my assumption is you're not going to do it alone. Like that'd be a whole lot of units by yourself, right? Whole lot. However, we do know a couple of people who push 150 or 170 units and have one transaction coordinator. Talk about efficiency. Now, you might hear that and go, Code, I never want to do it. I hear it and I go, I never want to do it. However, because there's people out there who run a business like that, it means they have an incredibly efficient side of the business. So it does push me to go and be like, all right, how are they so efficient? Even if it's not the way I want to run my business, I do want the efficiency of it. All right. So we're going to assume if you're doing this much business, we're going to assume that you're a pretty blended business, meaning about 50% sellers and 50% buyers. That gives you 175 listings. Sold, 70% conversion rate, 250 seller listings needed. You guys get the numbers. I want you to hold for a second though, where it says percent sold conversion rate, 70%. You're in a market right now that if you take 10 listings, how many sales do you get? Probably 9, maybe even 10, right? Like you're in a market, most of the country's in a market where everything is selling. I still want you to build your mathematical equation based on a true number that stood the test of time. 9 and 10 is not a true number that stands the test of time. 70% stands the test of time. So I really want you,
like 80%, or no, it was like 80. What did Gary say? Like the research he did, 87% of all realtors who roam the earth today have never sold in anything but this kind of market. That's a big statement. Like they've never sold in a down market. They've never sold in a market where when you take a listing, you might have to babysit this thing for 2 months or 3 months. That's a totally different business. All right, I digress. On the buy side, again, I'll go through them all at one time, faster for you. We're assuming 50% buyer listings sold. Same thing, 175 units, 70% sold conversion rate. The 70% sold conversion rate, though, on the buyer side is, here's how we find the number. Once they sign like a buyer listing with you or a buyer rep agreement, whatever you want to call it, a contractual agreement, whatever it is that your term is, once they sign it saying, I'm only going to work with you, we're looking at about 70% of them actually being able to purchase and buy and complete. Like that's the number that we're looking for. 250 total buyer listings needed, and then 70% appointment conversion rate. The 70% appointment conversion rate is if you were to meet with 10 brand new potential buyers, only 7 of them would sign a contract with you to say, I'm only buying from you. The majority of the time, the ones who don't are because they can't get financing. There's something that keeps them from being able to buy, or you just talk with them and you're like, you're not my guy. Like, I can't help you. Like this doesn't work for me. So we're looking at about a 70%. That's a really strong number that you can hold for a lifetime. You can hold that for a career. That's not just a good year or a bad year. That's a long-term number. All right. So what we end up looking at is this. You got 26 a month and 26 a month. It's a lot of business. And this doesn't seem like a lot if you're close, but if you're selling 3 a month or 4 a month, this feels like a bazillion miles away. I got it. I do too. We just want you to know the math behind it. Now, from here, we think about 3 things. 1, investment. The investment is time, cost of sale. Remember, cost of sale is company dollar, franchise fees, royalties, and then operating expenses. And again, like almost like a pop quiz, if we were standing in person, I'd go, what's the percentages? Remember, it's about 30% cost of sales, about 30% expenses. Then you have the time you put into the business, of course. And then on 2, go to the other side, you have performance. Performance would be, I want you to think levers, right? Behavior, skill level, ability, resources. And under resources, like you've got leads, appointments, talent, systems, tools. In the middle, where these 2 things touch, is an outcome. And the outcome is GCI and then net income. There's 2 things that you look at. What's the total amount I make? And then how much do I keep? Now, does it matter how much you keep? Sure does. I mean, at the end of the day, like there's people out there who gross a ton of money, but don't keep a ton of money. And I don't even know that that's wrong if it's for a period of time. Let me tell you a story. In 2013, 2012, in 12, 13, 14, and 15, I didn't net any money, like very, very little. And I was almost spending every dollar I was making in the business and then putting money back into it. And I remember I was talking to Gary one day, it had to be 2016, maybe the beginning of 2017. And I said, I feel like I'm just building this giant business, but I'm spending every dollar, like I'm not netting anything. And he looked at me and he said, Cody, when I was building Keller Williams, he said, I lost money for 7 years. He said, so when you hit the 8-year mark, come back and let's talk. And of course, I never hit the 8-year mark. Like I think it was by year 6, we really started making profit. And it's not wrong, but I'll tell you, I want you to build the business and chase the business that you want. For me, I was willing to suffer for those 4 or 5 years and find ways to make money and live on less money and just pour the money back into the company. Now, every year the company made more money. I just didn't get to keep it, but I wanted to move through the system fast. I didn't want to spend a lot of time. And the easiest way was to dump the money back in, just reinvest. And that was my choice. It didn't make it wrong or right. It just made it right for me. And I remember I had friends that would throw rocks at me and they had good intentions, but they didn't have to live my life. I did. So as you hear me talking about this, as much as we push a model and a system, just remember, how do you want it to look? You're in the driver's seat at this. Don't do something just because somebody else says it's how you ought to do it. Do it because it makes sense to you and you want to. Now, the elements of the economic model, so we call it the eco model, the economic model, 30, 30, 40, 30% operating expense, 30% cost of sales, leaving you about 40% net income. By the way, if you're at a 36% net income, I don't know that you need to squeeze out 4 more percent. I would tell you, let's go focus on building the business bigger instead of squeezing 3% or 4%. At the same time, if you're running a business and you're at 70% net income, which if your business is smaller, you might be 60 or 70% net income. Then the conversation would be, how do you want the business to look in a year? You might not be spending enough. You might be using just time to make money. You might not be investing enough. And that's a problem also. All right. So if you look at the cash flow, again, and it's just a different way of seeing it. If you've got 2.5 million GCI, you have a GCI from listing sales, GCI from buyer sales. You guys know all this. Listing cost of sales and buyer cost of sales. Now, when you look at this, look at how deep the buyer cost of sales is. That's 625. But on the listing side, only 125. So which one has a higher net income? Well, of course, the listing side does, right? And the reason for that is on the buyer side, it's really difficult. Like Gary would tell you, it's almost impossible long-term to build a real estate sales business. Let's say that you've got like 5 buyer's agents. If you're going to sell this many homes, like most teams would have 4 or 5 or 6 buyer's agents, it's really difficult long-term to not wind up at a 50-50 cost share. It's really difficult to not wind up sharing about half the commission with the buyer's agent. Now, there's some teams, and there's some really good teams out there that pay 35% to the buyer's agent. And the buyer's agent is thrilled and they like it and it's a great system. That's awesome. I got no problem with that. That's also usually a business that's been in business for 20 or 30 years and they have a conveyor belt of leads falling from the sky like every week in the business. Well, if you have a conveyor belt of leads, people will work for less of a split. But if they're having to lead generate just as much, we just end up at 50-50. Like 99% of the time, we just end up there. So what you see is like that's a more expensive side of the business. Whereas on the listing side, like you could take a listing, like you could take an amazing listing coordinator and you could take an amazing listing agent and you could run 200 listings a year through those 2 roles. And you could pay them really, really well, but you don't have to pay them half the commission. I want you to think about that. Now, when you think about this, I want you to think, where does your time go? If your time's on the buyer side, it's the cheaper side of the business. It's not the wrong side of the business. It's just cheaper. On the listing side, cheaper as in you make less, excuse me. There's not as much net profit. If you look at the listing side, like your higher net profits over here. But even with those words, you might hear me and go, Cody, I don't like the listing side. I like the buyer side. Nothing wrong with that. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's okay to build it the way that you want to build it. Just know what the numbers look like. All right. So if you look at conversion rates and leads generated, here's conversion rates like this. And these are the numbers I want you to look for. On the listing appointment side, 75%, and the seller listings taken, 70% listings sold. So if you go on 10 listing appointments, you need to expect to sign 7.5 of them. Now, here's what we find. The lower the producer, the higher the conversion rate. It's always the lower producer in a room. Like when we're live, there's always the lower producer that goes, dude, I close like 90% of my listing appointments. But when we dig, we find out they only went on 10 that year. When we dig, we find out the 10 they went on, 3 of them are related to them. 2 of them are really good friends from the gym. 2 of them are people they used to work with. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Like that's all good. The problem is it jacks the numbers. The higher the performer, it's always the higher performer in the room that stands up and they're like, my conversion rate's like 70%. And the whole room looks at that person almost in awe and they're like, what? Like you're the big dog here. Like you do more business than anybody. I would have assumed that you just knocked them all down and you closed them all. And they're like, nah, dude, we close like 70% of them. And 30% tell us, no, they're going to list with somebody else, or we can't list them, or it doesn't work. They have a lower conversion rate. And it's usually because they're more used to saying, hi, nice to meet you. Will you list with me? That's a different deal. It's a different conversion. All right. On the buyer side, 70% buyer listings taken, 70% buyer sold. Again, if you meet with 10 new buyers, you're going to expect to sign 7 of them, and they're going to be able to get financing, and 70% of those end up closing on a home. Those are really, really solid numbers. If you run your business for a year and you do better or worse, you can always change them. But those are really solid numbers to aim at. I'm telling you, I want you to aim at them. They're the best number for you to use. All right, so net income, if you look at it like this, again, $1 million, 2.5 in GCI, 750, you've got it, 7,100 in average commission. If you go through, here's where you end up. At the very bottom, I want you to see, like, forget the math because you can do the math. At the very bottom, total seller appointments needed, 333. Buy side, 357. So then the business's job is, how do I find 333 seller appointments this year? If you're going to look at a 1 million net income, the business's job on the buy side, 357. Now, will your conversion rates change the numbers? Yes. Maybe you need a little bit more or a little bit less. Will your average commission change the numbers? Yes. If your average commission is 11,000 instead of 7,100, you don't need as many units. So when you're doing your own math, this is just generally speaking for the country. When you're doing your own math, that's why it's so important that you use your numbers. All right. So again, you're right back at 26 a month on both sides. If you want to do 500, let me go through and get to the very end. If you want to make 500 grand based on a 68.75 average commission, so again, just another number about that 250 mark, right, is 182 units sold. All you need is 130 total seller appointments for the year and 240 buyer appointments for the year. Now, when you think about that, you divide that by 12 and you start looking at it for the month, and all of a sudden things begin to change. You need 11 seller listing appointments a month. You need 20 buyer listing appointments a month. So almost 1 per day on the business side, like business days, if you will. But that's to clear 500,000, which means your GCI is 1.2. That's a really big business, but it's a small focus. Then the question becomes, what does my business need to do to drive 11 new seller listing appointments a month? And what does my business need to do to drive 20 buyer listing appointments a month? And then you start answering those questions. By the way, this is why for some of you, you might look and go, Code, this is my plan 3 years from now. Awesome. All we need to do in 2021 is take a big jump towards it. And then in 2022, another big jump towards it. That's fine. I've seen too many people that make $100,000 a year go and write a plan like this for the next year, come nowhere near hitting it, get discouraged and stop. There's no win in that. And by the way, nobody said everything has to happen in a year, because it won't anyway. Now, if you look at the economic model on yours, you've got it in your workbook. You've got it like in front of you. Here's all I'm going to ask you to do. This is it, right? Like all I'm going to ask you to do. If we were live in person, I would say, great. All right, everybody, let's take 10 minutes. I'm going to stay at the front of the room and let's do this right here in the room. Don't walk out of the room. Stay in the room and do. Can't do that right now. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want you to take 2 minutes. Now, because we're distance, you could pause and you can run to the restroom or do whatever anyway. So that's totally fine. But I'm going to ask you, take 2 minutes, and all I want you to do is take a look at the 411, grab that sheet, and just throw 2 or 3 annual goals on it. I don't need you to fill this thing out from start to finish. I just need you to start. There's a power in starting something. On the economic model, the only thing I want you to do is write in the net income that you're after. And if I'm you, like, here's how I fill mine out. I fill out my current coming year, and I fill out the 4 or 5 year one. And for me, that's never constant. Like some years I think 4 years out, some years I think 5 years out. Who cares? Doesn't matter. What I'll do is I'll write net income. So when I do mine, like if I was doing mine with you, I'd write net income 2021. And then to the right, I would write 2025 or 2026 net income goal. Because I'm constantly looking at both. Because I've heard Gary say too many times, we underestimate what can be done in 4 or 5 years. And we overestimate 1 year. I'm okay if I hit or don't hit my goal for 2021. I know I can hit my goal in 2025 or 2026. I just have to become the person that does it. And so all I'm going to ask you to do is go through as far as you can on the economic model. Most of you will get down to about halfway through the sell side. And we're just going to take 2 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step out of the screen for 2 minutes. I'll be right back in. We're going to keep cruising. And all I want you to do is just start. Because I know if you start, you'll come back and finish it. All right, we'll see you back in 2 minutes. All right, very good. Welcome back. So that's how we're going to do like 3 or 4 of these. The next ones run a little bit faster. But I'll give you like a 2-minute break and then we'll just say, listen, just start it. Like I'm a big believer that I'd rather you be on the right path than be at the destination. I just want you on the right path. That's it. All right. So Lacey, if you'll cue the slides back up, we'll jump back into the slide deck and we'll keep moving. All right, very good. Awesome. All right, so lead gen model. So section 4, when you talk about the lead gen model, which becomes one of my favorites, right? Prospecting based, marketing enhanced. I need you to catch this. I would tell you to write it down. A prospecting based business can be shift proof. A prospecting based business can always work. The challenge is a prospecting based business is a lot of work. So we want you to be prospecting based, marketing enhanced. And there's nothing wrong with your business someday being marketing based and prospecting enhanced. That's okay too. Your business might get so big someday that you go, oh my gosh, I'm pretty much prospecting based and I'm marketing based. I got a big old group that just does a whole bunch of marketing. I got a big old group that does a whole bunch of prospecting, and we do both. There's nothing wrong with that. The reason that it's prospecting based, marketing enhanced, or vice versa, is that usually it's you. It's you and a team of 3 people. It's you and a team of 12 people. It's you and an assistant, or it's just you. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Like real estate is the only industry I know that it could be just you and you can make a couple $100,000 a year at it. Like that's really amazing. But when you think about this, prospecting based, marketing enhanced, money intensive is marketing, passive is marketing, and long-term results is marketing. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to end up doing both. In prospecting though, it's time intensive. You don't need to spend a whole bunch of money if you're going to be prospecting based. It's proactive. It's immediate results. It's right now. Here's the easiest test I've ever come up with for whether somebody should be prospecting or marketing based. If you are short on money in your business, I want you to be prospecting based. If you are short on time in your business, I want you to be marketing based. Here's the catch. You cannot be short on time and money simultaneously. Fair? I know. That's the catch. That's the rub. Because the truth is, if I'm willing to put 50 or 60 hours a week into my business, and I'm willing to work those 50 or 60 hours, then I can't have a time problem and a money problem at the same time. In my world, when I feel, because it's a feeling, when I feel like I'm short on money and I'm short on time, I have to ask myself a series of questions to get out of that frame of mind, because I know it's a lie. I know it's not true. I'm probably squandering my money somewhere, or I'm also probably squandering my time somewhere. And in my world, every time I feel like I'm short of money and short of time, when I really get to the end of the conversation, I'm wasting both. I'm wasting money and I'm wasting time. So that's kind of my litmus test. If you're doing great on money and you're like, hey, Code, I make great money. I'm good with money. I'm not worried about money. Money's great. I'm good. Time is a problem right now. Then use your money to buy time. Though if you say, gosh, you know what? Money is a problem, which is how most of us are, then you're going to use your time to buy money. You're just trading. You're going to trade something, right? It's going to happen. All right. Remember, here's one more piece on this. I wasn't going to go here, but we're doing fine on time. You're going to have chunks of your business, right? So I like to think buckets. And so like I'm big on note cards. And so if I looked at like 4 or 5 note cards, I'd look at them like this and I'd be like, all right, cool. So here's 4 or 5 buckets in my business. And in this one bucket, I've been doing it for 10 years. And I could be marketing based, prospecting enhanced. However, this form of lead generation, I just started. I'm not amazing at it yet. It was something I added to the business. And this bucket, I probably need to be prospecting based and marketing enhanced, or maybe not any marketing, like just prospecting based. On this one over here, do you get my point? Like based on your business, you're going to have different buckets. I don't know anybody who looks at their business that does a giant business and goes, my entire business, we don't do that. Like in general, But you're going to have buckets where you're like, oh my gosh, this one bucket, like we just started this farm. We just started doing it. It's incredibly intensive on time. We're throwing lots of time at it. We just started this new, does that make sense? I hope it does. I mean, of course I don't get to see you, so I can't see it register on your face, but you're going to have different buckets that they're not going to be the same all the time. So give yourself a break on that. One of the most important slides of the business planning clinic that we've come out with this year is this: 82% of your business comes from 4 sources or less. Every time Gary goes to, we have like, we used to call it a top 100 group. And by the way, that top 100 group today is like 220 or 230 agents. The lowest producing person in that group, the last time I checked, at the time was making just over $1 million a year. That's ridiculous. That's incredible. Like the person sitting in the room who was just glad to get an invitation and they were like, oh, I made it. I got in this year, made $1 million. Are you kidding me? Like this industry is awesome. And here's what we find. So Gary's constantly like emailing our group and asking our group and, hey, what are you doing with this? And what's this? I mean, incredibly research-based. And he'll ask us 2-3 times a year, like, what are your main sources of business? What's working? What's not working? What used to work that doesn't today? I mean, constant research. Here's what he found though, over and over and over and over again, is that the vast majority of our business comes from, and it's like 82%, comes from just 4 sources. Now, what we do is we think about the rule of 4. Now, there's always going to be the 5th. And what I want you to do is this. I want you to think, what are those 4? Now, you already know that for the typical realtor, one of those 4 is going to be what? Yeah, right. Referrals, right? The challenge with referrals is that's not the end of the conversation. When you think referrals as a business, I need you to ask a question. What kind of referrals? Are they proactive or reactive? Now, is there anything wrong with reactive referrals? Hell no, there's nothing wrong with reactive referrals. They're amazing. Reactive referrals, you're driving down the road, minding your own business, listening to your favorite Miley Cyrus song, and somebody calls you out of the blue and says, hey, my friend said that you're great at selling houses. I need you to sell mine. And you're like, yeah, baby. And you have a referral. Awesome. That's reactive. Proactive is where you're calling and you're saying, who do you know? And then, hey, can I call them? And you guys get my point. The difference is this: the reactive referral, you can't count on. The reactive referral, you can't put in a business plan and say, well, you know what? In 2021, I think I'm going to go ahead and just order up, like 30 reactive referrals. You don't know what they're going to be, but you can plan the proactive referrals. That's why it always drives me nuts when somebody stands on stage and says, my business is 87% referrals. Well, what does that even mean? What kind of referrals? Like, are these proactive or reactive? How long have you been in the business? How many units are we talking about? When somebody says I'm 80% referral based and they sold 6 homes last year, I'm not sure I care that much. And I don't mean that in a rude way. It's just not a business model to me. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Be careful who you listen to and be willing to ask enough questions. Be willing to ask. All right. So we all know, though, for the typical realtor, referral is going to end up in here somewhere, and repeat is going to end up in here somewhere. Another one of the top 4 is almost always, and you already know the answer, database, right? Like we already know that, like database or data bank, however you want to look at it, that's almost always one of the top 4. The other 2, though, take a far left turn. For some teams or businesses, it's new construction. For some teams or businesses, it's a relo account. For some teams or businesses, it's their geographic or sociographic, stay away from the schizophrenic farms, but it's one of those 2. For another agent, it's internet lead generation. They do a bunch of pay-per-click. That's awesome too. For another agent, so that's where it's like a hard left turn. And it's like, okay, well, this one, like they're all over the place. And some of it's dependent on, like in Portland, like I live in Portland, Oregon, you're not going to find very many agents here who build a very big business based on new construction. Like in our city, we just don't have a bunch of new construction. Like you can't just go out and say, cool, I'm going to go sell 700 new construction homes. We don't have those subdivisions here. Where you live, you might be able to say, all right, based on what part of town I want to work in or be in, you could maybe go and sell 700 units a year that are new construction. We can't. So some of it's dependent on geography, right? So it's never the same, but I just want you to think, this is where the pressure is. I want you to identify what your 4 are. Now, the 5th is just as important as the 4. Let me explain. As a mega agent, we look and we go, here's our 4 main sources. By the way, do we still care about source number 9? Heck yes. I'm a salesperson. I want it all, but I'm constantly looking, and I think buckets. I'm constantly looking at bucket 5 and bucket 6, hoping which of those can be moved up to a position of 3 or 4. Does that make sense? Because what I've learned is this: my 3rd or 4th best source of business is usually not reliable for decades. It might be reliable for a couple of years. It might be reliable for 3 or 4 or 5 years, but they come and they go. Like I remember when I was selling homes on my own and I had no staff, no help. This was before KW for me. Like I was struggling. I was selling 75 or 80 units a year by myself, no system, no model. And it would have been 2000, that would have been 2003, which makes me feel really old to tell this story, by the way. But alas, that's the truth. And I remember I looked down and I had this referral source the 2 years before that sent me like 20 or 25 units. That's awesome, by the way. But that year, that referral source no longer existed to me. And that's my point of the 3rd or 4th bucket doesn't always last for 10 or 20 years. When I was building the real estate teams that I have today in 2012 and 2013, we were heavy in Craigslist. Like we were running 1,000 ads in Craigslist, and we had computer terminals that we had shipped. Ridiculous story. We had computer terminals that we had shipped all over the world because Craigslist was pinging IP addresses, and we had to have our virtual assistants using IP addresses from all over the world so our Craigslist ads weren't getting flagged and deleted. Well, then by 2014 or 2015, nobody was getting that many leads out of Craigslist. Like we ruined the system. And so I looked down and I was like, oh my gosh, something that earned me a couple hundred sales last year kind of doesn't exist anymore. And so that's why bucket 5 and bucket 6 is just as critical as bucket 3 or 4. 1 and 2 are probably always going to be referrals, repeats, database. I get it, right? And that's a different game. Bucket 3 and 4, they're going to change over time. So you have to be looking at bucket 5 and 6. And I look at it like a talent scout for like a college. And I always think, listen, like if I'm a talent scout and we'll say it this way, if I'm a collegiate coach, I know at best I get my players for 4 years. They're not staying for 10. They're going to graduate college and move on, which means as good as he or she is, I got to replace this person. So I'm constantly scouting over here at smaller schools, or I'm scouting over here at the high schools, if you will, going, all right, well, who's the talent for next year? That's how I look at bucket 5 and 6. I promise you, this is important because 5 or 6 needs to become 3 or 4. And if it can't, then why is it number 5 or 6? Like it has to earn its right. All right, we'll move on. From here, we go to the database model. In the database model, this is the easiest way that I've ever seen to understand the database. You draw a circle and then you go, listen, you have lead capture. That's going to be prospecting and marketing, P&M. You're going to do both, right? Everybody drops into your database. And we like to say data bank because it works and acts like a bank. Inside, though, you have leads. Now, if you look, that arrow goes from leads to contacts. Now, contacts is where you strengthen the existing relationships. This is where you're having, like in bold, we talk about making 40 contacts a day. In a perfect world, your 40 contacts a day would all come from your database. The problem is most people don't have a big enough database to make 40 contacts a day for more than a few days, which means the pressure comes back to building the database bigger. So the answer is yes. Like you got to do it all. So look at the very top. You got lead gen at the top. And this is on the left-hand side. You have relationship management. I want you to write this down. The amount of money that you earn is going to be directly tied to your ability to manage relationships. You say it again. The amount of money that you can earn is going to be directly tied to your ability to manage relationships. And when you're selling homes, it's going to be managing the relationships in the database. If you ever decide to go build a great big team and you're no longer like directly selling, or all of a sudden you're leading only or managing only, or you're the team lead or whatever term you want to use, like a C-suite term or whatever, it's still going to be managing relationships. They're just going to look different. Now at the bottom, you have client and referral loops. And those loops, like that came when KW built commands, when we started talking about loops. You've got new and repeat, and you've got referrals. Now out of the database, you have new business that falls out. Out of the database, you've got repeat business that falls out. Out of the database, you've got referrals that fall out, and they go right back into the top of the funnel. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. It's just an easy illustration that tells you like what's happening inside, because everyone uses, I mean, basically nobody uses a shoebox with note cards anymore. I mean, the joke is you could, but why would you? That'd be ridiculous. Like, why would you do that? No one does that. And so everybody uses like their phone, everybody uses their computer, everybody uses their laptop, and everything is like this. And you're like, beep, boop, 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 beep, beep, boop, boop. It's just nice to see like, what does it look like? What's actually happening underneath the internet machine? Now, with this, then we move to communicate with everybody in your database, right? So this is what we're teaching today. We did away with like the 33 touch, like you won't even hear it anymore. Like it's been expunged from all of the KW University material. Like it doesn't exist anymore. And so what we talk about today is we say 19 to connect. And that's an easy way to look at it. Would be like 4 touches. That could be quarterly. It could be a phone call. 12 touches. That could be a monthly email, newsletter, market report, video. 2 touches could be promotional. It'd be like direct mail. Like these are best practices. It could be a magnet, a calendar, something about a sports team, local high school, like whatever works, right? And then 1 touch a year would be like an annual event. That could be a party, a movie. A friend of mine just hosted a really cool, she did like a really amazing pumpkin patch thing in her city. And she had people come and everybody got a free pumpkin. Like that makes sense. Like that's cool. Somebody else does like the pie giveaways at Thanksgiving, like whatever it is that you want to do something. Then you have 1 to cement. This is the high value touch in the middle. A high value touch that solidifies the relationship you've just established and opens the door for future interactions. In other words, if you're not providing any value, they don't keep listening to you, which is going to put pressure on you to provide value. Then saturation on the far side, 36 to convert. 36 to convert is different than 19 to connect. In 36 to convert, you got 4 touches. Those are probably telephone calls. You got 26 touches. By the way, what you don't see in here is text, and text could be just as powerful. You should have, in fact, time out for a second. You should be thinking, you should be looking at your business saying, what is my text strategy for 2021? I want you to write down the number 13%. Unfortunately, it's not the new proposed commission rate. You're probably like me and you feel incredible pressure on commission. I know, me too. 13% is the percentage of emails that big business teaches us get opened. So big business expects about 13% of their emails to be opened, though 91% of text messages get opened. Drastically different, right? Like think about that for a second. You should have pressure this coming year for what does my text campaign look like, not my email campaign. I was reading I love Harvard Business Review HBRs. They're short, they're easy, they make sense for somebody with my attention span. And I was reading one, this was probably 2 years ago, and it predicted that email would be dead or nearly dead within 5 years. And that was almost 2 years ago. Think about your email. Do you go through and read every single one? Do you delete them with abandon? Do you even open all of them? Do you even read the ones that you do open? The answer is no, 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 no. Though contrast that to your text. What does your text look like? Now, for real estate agents, to market through text does not look like marketing through email. We don't have the space. We don't have the attention span. It doesn't look the same. By the way, we're doing fine on time. So I'm going to give you, in fact, Lacey, can you pull me out of the PowerPoint? Mm-hmm. So if you think about texting, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas on text. This is so critical when you think about planning this coming year. We'll do thousands and thousands and thousands of texts a month. And what we've learned is this. Here's some things that give us a better rate of return on our text campaigns. Number 1, short. I always forget how many characters you're allowed to have in a tweet. I think it's like 240, 260. 40. Maybe it's 140. It's not a lot. If you look it up, I always forget and I always give the wrong damn number. But it's not a whole lot. Like you think about how, like Twitter, like how much space they'll give you to write. It's not a ton. You can't do this. You can only do this. And I can only assume that somebody really smart sits in a room somewhere, 280, thank you so much. Somebody really smart, it used to be smaller and they increased it. Yeah. Somebody really smart sits in a room somewhere and says that's the right number of characters to quickly grab someone's attention. Makes sense to me. So keep it short. I think it's a good rule of thumb. Number 2, this one's funny. Number 2, if you have a misspelled word or like a grammatical error, you have a higher return rate, a higher response rate. Now, there's two types of texters who roam the earth. Type number one writes a text and something gets changed. And they're like, oh my gosh, and they fix it before they send it. The rest of the earth, me included, looks at it and goes, huh, they'll figure it out. And you hit send. Or you hit send and then you go, oh yeah, huh, I didn't mean to say that. They'll figure it out. There's only two types of people, only two. I'm in the second group. Misspelled words, we have a higher return rate. Grammatical errors, higher return rate. Here's another one. Emojis. If you use an emoji, you get a higher response rate in texting. Think about how you text with your friends. The closer you are to the person, are you more or less likely to fix a grammatical error? The closer you are to the person, are you more or less likely to have the comma exactly where it's supposed to be, to have the apostrophe, to use the right semicolon? You get my point? Like the closer you know the person, the more you understand who they are, the more you'll just say it. And think about a text. You don't text your friend and say, dear Bob, would you and Jane, would you love to come up to the house to dine with Catherine and I on, you don't say that. You go, hey, you guys want to come over for dinner on Saturday, right? The better you know them. By the way, this is how the consumer works. It's how the consumer thinks. So anyway, so I digress. Emojis. Having an emoji, you get a higher response rate. Then on text, in different states or different areas, like there's different rules. Like in California, you can't even send a text to somebody if it's real estate related, or if you're a real estate agent and not have like your real estate license number. I mean, it's different everywhere you look. But I do know this. I do know that you need an amazing, incredible text strategy. I do know that. I do know that you need a text campaign for right after you meet a prospective buyer. I think you ought to have a text campaign for sale by owner, a text campaign for a listing appointment that you have coming up. Text, text, text. I promise you. Think about how many texts you're getting. You're probably getting a bunch of texts currently around politics right now. I am too. I'm getting more than I am getting emails because they get it. All right, Lacey, if you can pull me back into the PowerPoint. So that texting strategy is important. Whatever it is that you're going to use, however it is you're going to do it, you need to have it. So please build it out. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to do it all at one time. All right, so back to this. So we're on saturate, 36 to convert, 26 touches, bi-weekly emails, texts, offering some type of information, value, something to the consumer. 2 touches would be like events or get-togethers or parties. 4 touches would be like promotional direct mail. You guys get it. And so that would be like 36 touches a year. And what happens is people move from one side to the other. Now, here's what we can't count. Here's what we can't count. How many touches do you have in social media? Birthday wishes, hellos, liking someone's photos, saying something nice. By the way, if you're going to do more business in social media, I want you to consider this. A like or a heart is like an air high five. And it's this good. A comment is like a conversation and it's this good. Do you see the difference? And so you're going to do both. But just remember, going through and liking a whole bunch of stuff isn't the same as actually commenting. It isn't the same as actually having a dialogue. You guys get that, like you get it, like that's just human nature, right? All right, so again, warning, TCPA, make sure that you're following the rules around this, make sure you're following the rules around the do not call list, and basing, your best bet is just to talk to your market center, your broker in charge, your team leader. I promise your market center has a policy and can tell you, listen, do this, don't do that. Because it is different in different parts of the country. And so your best bet is just to ask and then follow the rules. Here's what I will say. I've been around this long enough that we used to laugh at this. We don't laugh at it anymore. We used to like jokingly say, like I remember saying from stage, I was on stage with somebody and they were right next to me and he jokingly said, yeah, you know, we budget like 2 fines a year. At the time, the fine was like 10 grand, right? And they're like, yeah, we budget 2 fines a year. No one's laughing anymore. Like this has become very real and the consumer has driven this. And so again, just follow the rules in your market center and you're going to be groovy. You're going to be good. You're never going to get in trouble. All right. So plan your lead generation model. Now, when you look at your lead generation model, it's on my screen. So it's in your book as well. You've got my database, my business. I want you to look how many contacts needed to achieve the goals of your economic model. Now, remember, when you talked about the economic model and we talked about like the percentage, how many leads, excuse me, how many appointments you have to have, then you go, great, how many contacts do I need? Now, contacts to leads is another number that you have to start tracking. Like, all right, so if I make 5 contacts, how many appointments do I set? If I make 50 contacts, how many appointments do I set? And it also depends on what bucket you're in. Like, you're going to look at your business, and I wish everybody had this conversation with everybody. It's not static. It's not the same. You will have an average. Like, you will have averages. Like, you might look down and be like, all right, for about every 15 or 18 contacts, I set an appointment. But even within that, I would tell you to go a little bit further. Like, track it a little deeper and go, listen, in this bucket, I'm like one appointment for every 3 contacts. But over here in this bucket, I'm like 1 appointment for every 15 or 20 or 30 contacts. Like, it's just going to be different. And until you know those numbers, you can't do anything with them. You're just guessing. All right. So then the most important thing here for you for today, because we're going to do another one of those 2-minute things, is I want you to write my lead generation sources. This is going to be the best use of your time. The 4, and then the 4 that you would like them to be in the future. Like 4 you would add to it, not necessarily replace unless you have one you want to replace. But that would be your best time spent in these 2 minutes. Then lead generation activity. I want you to write in like how many lead generation calls do you make? So you get my point. Fill this out as much as you can. Starting it is more important than finishing it, because if you'll start it, you'll actually finish it. But let's put a couple of minutes. We'll do 2 minutes into the lead gen model. I'll be back on screen in 2. All right, Lacey, if you'll cue the slide deck back up. All right, so we've had 2 minutes at that. Hopefully you started it and you did something with it. That's awesome. Couple of thoughts around this. Remember, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. So do something with it. All right, let's talk about the budget model for a minute. In budgeting model, this is 2 tools in one. So let me catch up with you here. That way I've got my paper right in front of me. It's two tools in one. Now you've got the planning on the budget side, planning tool. This is created annually, projects expected returns and cash flow, restrain the gain, if you will. In other words, like hold back, like be careful, like caution, right? On the P&L side, this is a management tool. The budget's for planning, the P&L, the profit and losses for managing. We would tell you to look at it at least bi-weekly. So like I like to look at mine weekly. You can choose you could do whatever you want to with it, but at least a couple times a month, right? Shows actual versus projections, adjust to win. Listen, let me give you a couple of hacks at this, because everybody who hears this goes, yep, I should totally have a budget. And then they don't. And everybody who hears this says, yep, I should totally have a P&L. And then they might not. Once you have a budget and once you have a P&L, you'll probably never go back. Like you'll be great. Here's the easiest way to begin. Fit it on a note card. Just write it on a note card. Is that going to be an amazing budget? Nope, but it's something. Is that going to be an amazing P&L? Nope, but it's something. I am convinced that we make these things too complicated. I'm convinced that we make them too hard and then we don't actually go out and do it. Because at what point are you going to sit down and go, you know what I've got? I've got 2 days to put together an amazing budget. By the way, I'm not good at budgeting. I don't even like doing it. And I didn't go to school to do it, but I'm going to go do it. No, you're not. Like that's not going to happen. So put it on a card, let it grow from there. I did not have a great budget and I did not have a P&L like at all until it became somebody else's job. And I said, hey, I need to pay you to do this. Like it didn't happen for me until then. And down at the bottom, invest, don't spend. Practice accountability, not accounting. You don't need to be an accountant at this. By the way, there's lots of people that you could hire. Here's who I like. In fact, Lacey will drop it into the chat box for you. I'm going to give you a couple of names of some of the vendors that I work with for some of the things that relate to business planning. So I love Streamline Business Solutions, SBS. They're awesome. They're based in Phoenix and I live in Portland. I've never been in their office and they've been doing my books for 7 years, maybe. I've never once stepped foot in their office. I don't think it needs to be somebody local. By the way, if you're in Texas, which you are, and you hired somebody in Texas, you're probably not going to walk in their office anyway. It's going to be text or email or whatever, or phone call. What I like about Streamline Business Solutions or SBS is that they work with real estate agents. And so like, I don't have to teach them what I mean by the chart of accounts for MREA. I don't have to teach them what I mean by, well, I earn all this money in commission, but I got to pay X% to my brokerage. And I've got this that goes here and this that goes there. They know all those things. I've never met a general accountant or CPA, and I've worked with a handful. I've never met one who understood those things. I'd have to continually teach it to them. The other thing I like about SBS, and I don't make any money if you use them, but I want you to use somebody great. Well, the other thing I like about SBS is that because they work with so many realtors, they will sometimes say to me, Cody, this doesn't make any sense. Out of everybody we work with, you're the only guy who spends so much money on blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, thanks for saying something. Like I had no idea, right? So I like it for that too. So anyway, check them out, Streamline Business Solutions. They're awesome. As a husband and wife team, they're great people. Anyway, so the MREA budget terms. Let me cover these so you know, it's like a definition, right? Cost of sales. This is what it costs you to acquire revenue. So again, COS, cost of sales. That's going to be the brokerage fee that you pay, your cap, your royalty, your splits, if you will, right? It's also going to be if you have commissions that you pay, if you pay out referrals or referral fees, that goes in cost of sales. If you hire a buyer's agent and you split the deal 50-50 or whatever the number is, that goes in cost of sales. Number 2 is gross profit. Gross profit is revenue left after cost of sales. Pretty simple so far. Number 3, then you take out all of your operating expenses. Now, this is cost of running the business, whether or not a transaction occurs. Like you've got to pay this, you've got to pay that. These are all set. You have to have them. Now, real quick, time out on operating expenses. I'm okay if you run, and by the way, we would say that these are not personal expenses. At the same time, I would tell you that you're very smart. Gary will tell you that one of the greatest pieces of owning a business is you get to make the IRS your partner. Think about that. Like you get to have smart write-offs and smart deductions, and smart businesses get to use the IRS as a business partner. Now, this is where you have to do what's appropriate for you. This is where you have to take the risk that you want to take. What are you willing to do, not willing to do? What does your accountant say you could or couldn't do? I do have an amazing, like if you have a great accountant, then great. Like SBS does bookkeeping and accounting, if you will. But my actual people who do taxes for me, and Lacey will drop this in here also, is Nielsen Law Group, and they're based in Phoenix also. Again, I have never been in their office, and they've been doing my accounting, if you will, for also 7 or 8 years. I also like them because they're 2 partners. One's an attorney, one's a CPA. So the firm has both. So the firm says, listen, if you ever get in trouble, we've already got the attorney who's representing you in the taxes. They also handle a ton of accounting for real estate agents, giant teams, expansion groups. Like that's how I found them. So if you have a great accountant, keep using them for heaven's sakes. If you don't have a great one, or you'd like a great one, check out Nielsen Law Group, NLG. I don't make any money if you use them, but if they're good for you, then great. Like I love helping, and if that's one way, then awesome. Anyway, I'm okay if you almost run like 2 sets of books, if you will. One set of books will have all of your actual true business expenses. The other set of books would be like, listen, here's all the things I put against the business that are completely allowed. Like they're completely allowed. Your CPA will tell you these are totally allowed, but they're kind of personal too. Like I use my phone for this also, or I do that or whatever, right? The reason that you almost want to have 2 sets though, is so that you can get clarity. So you know what's realistic and then what you're adding on that's just for tax benefits. It's just important to know. All right, number 4, net income, pre-tax income after cost of sales and operating expenses. Before we move away from the budget term, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 1 step on the budget this year, just 1. And that might be you saying, I'm going to write it on a card. That's awesome. Good. If that's a step further than you were, awesome. If that's hiring somebody, awesome. If that's filling one out, great. Whatever it is fine. But if you don't take a step toward it, I mean, some of you have been to a business planning. I talked to somebody the other day that they've been to a business planning clinic every year, at least once for 10 or 12 years. And they've never once put together a budget. They've never once done a 411. They've never once looked at their cost of sales. They just hear the same thing every year and never do anything with it. Well, that's a bummer. And I don't know that you're going to do it all in 1 year, but you could do something. And remember, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. Now, the easiest way for me to talk about budget or money is for you to set a budget or money appointment. Here's what I do. This is just what I do. You could choose whatever you want. Every Friday, and I've done this for years and years and years. Every Friday, I visit my money. Every Friday, I look at all the accounts. I look at all the balances. I look at all the expenses. Every Friday, I look at every credit card expense. Every credit card bill. And I pay everything every single Friday. Now, there were lots of times in building my business that I couldn't pay every credit card on every Friday. There were lots of times that I had to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to pay these this Friday. I'm going to wait. I got closings next week. I mean, I've done this, right? It's been a long time since I couldn't just pay everything on Friday. But what it caused me to do was it caused me to take an inventory every single week. And my money never got too far away from me. And who I learned this from was Gary. Every Friday, he has a meeting with one of his assistants, and they open this binder, and everything in it is just the money of Gary's life. What's happening, what's not happening, what are we spending, what are we not spending? And if you would just start that, even if it was 5 minutes, and you sat down by yourself and opened up an app for whatever your bank account is, and you just took an inventory every Friday of your money, I promise you that tiny step won't be a tiny step a year from now. I promise. Like that's one of those little things that you can do that changes everything. All right. So budget model benchmarks, total GCI. Oh, by the way, do you still have do you remember that simple personal budget that Abe built?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine, Abe Shreve, who's been like a coach to some of the biggest agents on planet Earth, he built a really, really simple, back when COVID started, he built a really simple personal budgeting tool. It's so good. It's incredibly basic. It's very simple. It's very easy, but it's really good. Anyway, Lacey's going to drop in. There's a number you can text, and I think you just text the word budget. I think that's it. Yeah, it's budget to whatever 5-digit or 6-digit number it is. She'll drop it in there, and you'll just get it and go through and use it, like having a personal budget. All right, so I digress. Budget model benchmarks, 30% cost of sales, 30% operating expenses, leaving about a 40% net income. That's the goal. That doesn't mean that you're running a bad business if your numbers aren't this. You might be 44% or you might be 34%. It's okay. These are benchmarks of what to hit towards. Like, that's why, remember, a model exists not so much that you follow it, even though we use the term follow the model. The model does not exist so much to follow it. The model exists so that when you get off track, you know where to get back. And when you get over here, you know where to get back. I didn't really understand this until I saw Gary one day, and he grabbed a flip chart, like that's just a Garyism, right? And he drew a big line and he goes, this is the model. And he goes, none of you people are going to follow it. He goes, because nobody follows it. He goes, I don't even follow it every day. He goes, it's here so that when you get here, you know where to get back. And when you get here, you know where to get back. He said, nobody follows a model 24/7. There's challenges, there's life, there's changes. And I just feel like we put so much pressure sometimes on ourselves because we hear things like follow the model, which is true. But a more true way to say it would be know when to get back to the model. Know where that model is. So when you get over here, you know where to come back. Like, that's true north. So that's how I look at the world when it comes to the models that we teach, because they're true. I just don't know anybody. I don't know any robots who never make a mistake. I don't know any robots who never get off track. Like, of course, man. All right. So cost of sale and operating expenses as percentages. These are interesting. So if you look at it on the left-hand side, the smaller box, you have cost of sales, and this is at the MREA level, right? Listing specialist about 125. That's only about 5% of GCI. Then you have buyer specialist at 625, which would be about 25% of GCI overall. But it's like 50-50 of just the buyer side. It's a big chunk of money. And most people end up there. And then you have other cost of sales, which isn't very much. Like if you're a KW agent, outside of these things, I mean, your cost of sales aren't very much. Like your cap at your brokerage is small. By the time you pay it, it's at 100%. Like our model is very, very inexpensive. So total cost of sales, about 30%. Operating expenses, you've got the bigs. And the bigs are number one and number two, compensation and lead gen. And if you're running an MREA level business, you're probably spending about 360 in comp. That's a lot. Like, that's salaries, right? That's not inexpensive for most people. Then you have lead gen at 2.25. I need you to hang on this one for a second. Just hang on it. What does business look like the first year you can invest 225 grand into lead generation? It might look different than it does today. Most of us won't go and spend 225 tomorrow if we're not already close. This is where we talk about success being sequential. It's not at one time. It doesn't happen simultaneous. I want you to look at this and I want you to see, oh my gosh, there's going to be a day in my business that I could put 225 into lead gen. Good grief, man. I mean, 10 grand a month is 120. That's almost $20,000 a month in lead gen. Some of us aren't even making $20,000 a month in general. That doesn't mean that we can't. Remember, 4 or 5 years from now, depending on where you are today, you could easily hit those numbers, even if you were new. I've got so many friends that by the time they hit year 5 or year 6, they were knocking down this much business. I've also got lots of friends who 10 and 20 years in are still talking about knocking down this kind of business, but don't. Both of those are true. All right, so the rest I won't crawl through, but you'll see education and coaching. Look how big education and coaching is. Every time I teach this in person, like I'll turn off the PowerPoint and I'll walk around the room and I'll ask questions like, how many of you think you're underspending on a few things? And people are always like, yeah, I underspend on this and I underspend on that. I know, I did too. Until you start tracking it. All right, so I digress. I just wanted to show it to you. Budget benchmarks by GCI. This would be great to take a screenshot of, and you've got it in your book as well. But these are best practices at different GCI levels because they aren't the same. Like when you look at 150 grand, if you're an agent who makes 150 in GCI, in most markets, that's about 18 or 20 units a year in most markets. That person is only spending about 13% in cost of sales. Their gross profit is 87%. Like, it's an incredibly high profit as percentage. Then their expenses might be 38, leaving a net income of almost 50%. Like they keep just about half of every dollar they make. Whereas when you look, further down, you get to 970 and you get to 1,000,006. Take a look at those in the middle. That person usually is netting 29 and then 26. And then at 3.4, sometimes 22%. These are real numbers. Like every time Gary comes to our top agent group and we look at them, like these are our numbers. Like we bring them in. The reason that we talk about this is that there's times in your business, there's seasons in your business. We don't think that you just hit a 40% net income and poof, you're there forever. Nah, there's probably going to be some years that dips, it waxes, it wanes. This is why not being alone is so important. This is why having an amazing coach is so important. I remember I was talking with Abe one day and I was like, and I just gotten home from this incredible KW event and I was really discouraged. I was just flat discouraged. Does that ever happen to you or is it just me? And I was like, this sucks. And I remember I was like, man, this is terrible. Like my net income at the time was like 8%. 8. That sounded horrible. And he goes, well, Cody, what about your reinvested earnings? And I said, my what? And he goes, reinvested earnings. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, I know, because you dropped out of high school. And I said, that's not very funny, Abe. And he goes, listen, what you don't know is reinvested earnings. He said, you've got earnings that put you at 25 or 30%. You're just pouring them back into the business so fast, you're only keeping 8%. And I went, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Do you get my point as to why I'm sharing the story with you? Like sometimes you need somebody to give you some perspective about how far you've come instead of how far you're still thinking you have to go. Like I understand, I live the same life that you do. So the reason we show this is that there's going to be peaks and valleys. Like there's a few spots, there's like no man's land. Like no man's land for most realtors is cracking 100 units a year. Then they get to 100 units a year and a lot of them spend a few years like around 100, 80, 110, 90, 112. Then they'll blast their way up to 150 or 200 units. Most people will get stuck there for a little while and they do this and then they blast to the next level and then they get stuck there. And then it took me 3 years to get around 500 units a year. Like we were 450 one year, 480 the next year, 420 the year after that. And then it went to like 650 or 700. It didn't hang out in the fives. There's natural benchmarks for this. Just like a market center, like I own 2 big brokerages, one here and one in Phoenix. And there's natural ceilings in a brokerage. One of those natural ceilings is about 250 agents. And then once you crack it, you usually don't go to 260 or 270. You usually go to 3 or 330. Like there's natural numbers anyway, there's natural numbers. All right. Operating expenses. These are categories by GCI. This would be great for a screenshot. This would be great. We're not going to crawl through it. It'd be great for a screenshot or you have it in your book as well. This is giving you, based on those same numbers, what the actual numbers look like. When we poll agents and we look at their actual P&Ls, these are their averages. So it's important to know. And it doesn't mean that yours is bad if you're a little up or a little down. It just means perspective. And you go, okay, well, why is it up or down? Maybe the type of business you run looks this way, or the type of business. I mean, I started a real estate business in Portland in 2010 and didn't know a soul. So guess what? I spent money. Like I spent money because I didn't know a single person. Like there was no one that I could say, cool, let's start with the database. Didn't have one. In fact, the only people I knew were other mega agents. Like I knew Chris Suarez before I moved here, but Chris was probably not going to buy or sell houses from me. And so my database was basically bunk and I had to go build one, which cost me some money early on. And you would tell me, gosh, you're overspending based on these numbers. And I'd say, maybe, but I'm building a business that I want. So I just want you to hold firm to that. Now, here's the flip side to it. It's really difficult if you're alone. If you're with a great coach, like if you have a great maps coach, it's a lot easier because you can go through and have some perspective around it. All right. Anyway, this is a great one to take a screenshot of and look at, but it just shows you that sometimes we're not spending the money we should. And sometimes we're overspending the money that we shouldn't be. All right. So MREA, profit and loss. When you take a look at this, this would be the simplest way of building a P&L. You've got residential income, listings, sales, builder. You guys get the point, right? You could literally fill this thing out top to bottom. There's no reason not to. Then at the bottom, you have employee profit share, you have other pre-tax expenses. Remember, if you're going to build a great big like real estate sales team, or if you're going to build like an MREA level team, Gary gave you in the MREA book what he suggests to use as a model if you're going to do profit share within your own team. And by the way, it's okay if your profit share is based on a couple $1,000 or 10 or anything. It's a matter of starting. It's not a matter of where you end up. It's a matter of starting. Anyway, here's a very simple, very basic P&L. Now, your plan, your budget model. We're going to do the 2-minute thing again. And we're probably like, yeah, you guys are doing great on time. We're going to do the 2-minute thing again. And all I want you to do is just go through this as close as you can. I don't need you to go to your bank. I don't need you to look online. You have an idea of a round number. That's all I'm asking you to do, is just begin with that. And so you'll see you have based on the MREA and then your budget plan. So you have the numbers based on MREA, based on where you are. If you're making about 300 grand, you would use those numbers. If you're making $1 million, then you would use those numbers. You have them. All right. So we'll take 2 minutes. Just go as far as you can through this. I just want you to start. It's important to start. We'll see you back in 2 minutes. Have fun. All right, Lacey, if you'll put the slides back up, that'd be great. Let me give you guys a couple, just in case I forget, as we kind of start working towards the end of our time. A couple things I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. There's a tool out there that doesn't exist yet. So let me say it again. It doesn't exist yet. It's like this close to it. It's like a ½ inch from it. There's a company that I met that at the time, with KW, Jason Abrams and Josh pulled off this amazing like tech conference, and we did it in Vegas. And I went and I spoke there, and we got to meet like the best of the technology businesses of real estate. And this was December of 2019. And then we had the winners, and then we invited the winners, and they went to Inman with us. Anyway, that's not even part of the story. Anyway, one of the companies I met was called Likely.ai, Likely, likely, like likely to list, .ai, which stood for, of course, artificial intelligence, right? Anyway, Brad, who's a super good dude, we started using Likely AI around the country, and this part does exist. We started using Likely AI around the country, and they just simply give us like geographical areas of who's likely to list, who's not, like based on what they're doing online, based on their activity. But here's what I want you to hear. I started working with Brad, and I said, man, you know what doesn't exist in the market is where an agent can take their database and upload it to a system and then have you scrub it and send it back based on likeliness to list. And so Lacey is going to drop in the chat box for you their website, and there's a unique website you can go to, or a code or whatever, that I think, does it give them 100 for free?
Something like that, or it gets them like in first.
Yeah, it either gets you in first or 100 for free. We've had a couple of iterations of this, like promo, to get it going as they've been getting started, but they do really, really, really well in Texas. They don't do really well in Northern California, but they do really well in Texas. And so if you're interested in that, the idea of it was you could take your database of 500 people, send it to them like a CSV file. They scrub it, they run it through their AI machine, boop, 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 and they send it back and they say, listen, based on these 500 people and what they do, this is most likely to buy or sell. This one's least likely to buy or sell. And they send back like scrubbed data, because the systems they run it through go, listen, this person's no longer at this address, or this person no longer has this phone. Like, it's really, really good. And they've done what I think is really good pricing around it. And they'll give you, I think it's 100 for free by using my name. So if I can help, then awesome. But check them out. Like, I'm using it. We've been prototyping it and using it across the country. I think you'll really like it. So take a look at it. All right. Anyway, I digress. All right. So organizational model. This one's one of my favorites. When you think about, because this one is all about the vision, right? When you think about the MREA 7th level organizational model, and let me say this before I go through these models real quick. There is no mandatory stopping point for you. You might look at this and go, you know what? Life is amazing for me. Life is a 10 at level 4. And that's what I want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfect. You might look at it and go, life is amazing for me at level 1 or level 2. And that's amazing too. You do not, I remember we were at family reunion and we were talking to somebody after one of our big events, and they walked up to me like crying, and they just said, I finally have let go of like this internal pressure to become a 7th level agent, because I don't even want to be, but it's what we talk about all the time. And so I just kind of thought that's what I had to go do. Listen, you don't have to do anything. The coolest thing about KW and the coolest thing about the models of KW that I love the most is it's like a bus. And just like any other bus, you get to pull the little cord when you see your bus stop. When you're like, hey, I want to get off there. This is where I get out. Like this is as far as I want to go on the bus. Like you pull the cord and you stop on level 4 and you enjoy level 4 because that's what you wanted to do. You don't have to do something you don't want to. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, right? So if you look at first level, and we'll go through and we'll build this out together. If you look at first level, this is where it's usually personal productivity. You are a solopreneur, right? You do the lead gen, you capture and convert, you do the presentations, you do the showings, you do the writing, you do the coordinating, you manage the money, and you have the mindset and vision. By the way, can you make really good money here? Yes, yes. You could hang out at level 1 and make 250, 300. You might not make 400 or 500. Like, it's pretty hard to crack 400 or 500. I mean, I don't know, unless you live in Santa Monica. Like when I teach in Santa Monica, like their average sales price, like their average commission is 24 or 26 grand. So maybe for them, but for the majority of the country, it's really hard to get to 400 or 500 in level 1, but you could easily get to 200 in level 1. Level 2, this is where you begin to make your first hire. And you've got first hire, you have training, you have accountability. The pro tip here would be this: until you have an amazing administrative person, don't hire anybody else. Let me say it again. Until you have a great admin, don't hire anybody else. Just in case you're not paying attention right now, until you have a great admin, don't hire anybody else. The biggest mistake that we make on the hiring side is not that we're good or bad at hiring. Let's just make peace with the fact that most of us are good at selling homes and not good at hiring. So I've already made peace with that one. I got it. Better than I used to be, but that's not like my forte. And it certainly wasn't in the beginning. However, the biggest mistake that we make is that we hire salespeople too fast. And the problem is we hire salespeople too fast with no administration behind it. I want you to put your foot on the throat of administration and not let it up. I want you to stand on administration and not let it up. Think about like in basketball, right? Like when you stop dribbling, you set a foot, you can pivot, but you can't pick it up. If you pick it up, you're traveling. And that's how I want you to look at this. Admin, admin, admin. Go with admin. Do not hire salespeople first. It's a mistake, I promise you. In the third level, this is where there's a lead admin, and there's a transaction coordinator. We still haven't even brought on salespeople. Now, this is systems, think big. This is succeeding through others. This is going too deep. In other words, if the transaction coordinator doesn't show up, there's still someone between you and the job. And that's the lead admin. That's what we mean by going too deep, like it's 2 arm lengths away from you. If somebody quits, got sick, got ran over by a bus, or something happened, or they have to move overnight or something crazy, the job doesn't land back at you. In this world, the job comes right back to you. You don't want to spend too much time in level 2. Level 2 is one of those no man's lands. You could spend years in level 1, make 200 or 300 grand, live a pretty good life, have some help when you need it, maybe pay an agent to help cover you when you're on vacation or whatever. Like, there's lots of choices. Level 2 though, don't hang out here too long. Like, this one's a tough one because you're going to have expenses and you're going to have more money, but you might have less profit than you did in level 1. And so my advice to you is blast through level 2 as quick as you can. The quicker you can get to level 3, the better your life looks. Now, when I say quickly, maybe that's 8 months, maybe that's 20 months. I don't know. It doesn't need to be 10 years though. 8 or 12 or 15 months, man, that goes in a blink of an eye, right? Like, that's nothing. Like, it's already the end of October. It's basically Christmas tomorrow. You guys know how fast things go. Like, the older I get, the quicker everything moves. And so when I say quick, it might be a year or 2. That's fine. Just don't spend too long there. All right. Third level, you, lead admin, transaction coordinator. Preferably the admin that you hired becomes the lead admin. Like, that would be a perfect world, right? I don't live in a perfect world, but that would be a perfect world. All right. Then you go to fourth level, level 4. This is where Gary rewrote it because it needed to be updated as to how life looks today. So in part 1 and part 2, so level 4 is still level 4, but there's 2 parts. Part 1, there's you still have the lead admin, you still have the transaction coordinator. You hired a leads manager because now you have more leads. You have an OSA, ISA, you have outside sales agents, inside sales agents, maybe it's telemarketing, whatever you want to call it is fine. And then you have a showing assistant. So level 4, part 1, still no salespeople. Like, the lead manager and OSA, ISA person will be the closest to a salesperson that you have. And then the showing assistant maybe, but they're not buyer's agents yet. They're not listing specialists yet. You're holding all that. Here's what we want you to think. If you're hiring help and your job just gets smaller and smaller and smaller to where the main portions of your job for 50 hours a week, I'll just use the number, for 50 hours a week is to lead generate, go on appointments, sign contracts, negotiate deals. When you're a solopreneur, it's hard to do that 50 hours a week because you're also doing this, and you're running over here, and you're going to the closings and all this other stuff. So it's hard to put the majority of your time into that. But when you have 4 or 5 people around you on level 1 of part 4, you could spend 80% of your 40 or 50 hour weeks in leads. You get my point, right? And the money just does this. The money begins to stack and you make more and more and more. Like, the profit margin in level 4, part 1 is incredible. Now, in level 4, part 2, you have the same business, but now you've brought on a lead buyer's agent. And hopefully, in a perfect world, the showing assistant that you hired maybe moves into that role. Again, I haven't lived in a perfect world, but it would be awesome if it worked out that way. And it would also be awesome if you had 2 showing assistants. That'd be great too. Here's what we want you to think. The showing assistant model works incredible. One of the best people I know that's done it has been Seychelles Van Poel in, she's either in Dallas or Houston. I always forget which. I want to say Dallas, almost certain. But Seychelles is awesome. And she's got some videos out about how her team specifically handles showing assistants. Anyway, it's a part of the model that's been poorly done by a bunch of people. Just because something's been poorly done doesn't make the idea poor. And every year you'll see Gary put somebody on stage who's done amazing with showing assistants. Like, we had somebody up there a couple of years ago that did like 350 units with a showing assistant. That's awesome. Just because people mess it up, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. So just be careful with that. Now, real quick, and I'll move on. The first showing assistant, I want you to think steps. I don't want you to think finish lines, think steps. The first showing assistant you have is probably a friend down the hall who makes less money than you that would love to pick up some of your extra showings. Awesome. Your first showing assistant is probably someone you go to the team leader and you say, listen, I've got extra leads, but I don't always have extra leads. I've got extra leads this month, but last month I was kind of shy, and next month I might be kind of shy too, but this month I'm a little bit rich on leads. That's good. That's how business looks. Most people don't just hit a new norm and nothing changes from there. Gary will tell you that you would use a showing assistant in the beginning only sometimes. And you would cherry pick and you'd go, listen, I need all these leads when times are tight. Cool. You don't feed the showing assistant. That's why a part-time one or somebody who that's not their only income is great. The problem is what most agents do is they bring somebody on too fast and they have to give them all their leads, and now they're splitting the money. And that will bankrupt your business before you ever even get moving. All right. Level 5 has also 2 parts, part 1, part 2. So in level 5, you've still got the OSA, ISA, you still have the leads manager, but now it's like distinctly different jobs. In the bottom, you've still got transaction coordination. This is probably more than one person at this point. Or maybe it's one person plus a listing manager. Like they only handle the listing sides. By the way, at this point in your business, you're still the listing agent. You're still going on the listings. You're probably still cherry picking the buyers. What I mean by that is you might have a buyer that you've worked with for 10 years. They're amazing. They're the CEO of some company. She's awesome. She's incredibly influential. And you're like, listen, I'm helping her. Like, I'm not giving this person to the buyer's agent division. I'm going to do this one. That's perfect. Nothing wrong with that. You can always feel free to cherry pick. These are your people. This is your business. So I digress. Lead buyer's agent, they probably have some showing assistants. From the typical buyer, you're probably a couple of people away from the typical buyer. Like if someone doesn't show up one day, there's somebody else who's going to deal with that. But you're absolutely still the listing agent. Now in part 2, you bring on the listing agent. You see where we drew that line and we go over here, we go listing agent. Now that part 2 for the listing agent could start as a junior listing agent. It could start at, it could be your lead buyer's agent who's been with you now for a couple of years and they'd like to move to the listing side. They remain the lead buyer's agent, but they start dabbling on the listing side if that fits their KPA, if it's the next right step in their job. Like you get all that, right? Like take leverage series and learn that, but it doesn't mean that it can't have the same name. It doesn't mean that Bob can't be the lead buyer's agent and be a listing agent on the team and be transferring that direction. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a really good point to make too. It's not uncommon in building phases for there to be more than one bubble per name. Nothing wrong with that. It's okay. All right. Level 6 has 2 parts also. What Gary said was, as he dug into this over the last 18 or 20 years, he's like, all right, it's gotten more complicated. It's not different, but it is more complicated. Like the job is more complicated. In part 1 of level 6, the difference is you've got a director of sales at this point, and you have a buyer's agent division, listing agent division, showing assistants, whatever. You've got somebody who it's her job to be the director of sales. By the way, it's really common, especially for a little while, for the listing agent to also be the DOS. Like that's really common for a little while. Like maybe she's doing both for a while or he's doing both for a while. And then as the business grows, you just continue to hire. It's okay if someone does 2 jobs for a while. But in part 1, you add an expansion agent and you say, all right, I'd like to move down the street, or I'd like my business to move down the street. Listen to me. You live in one of the best places on the planet to run expansion. I do not. Living in Portland, Oregon, I can't just drive 45 minutes or 60 minutes and have a whole new market. As soon as I leave like the metro Portland area, everything gets incredibly small. Where you live, for most of you, in a 3 or 4 hour radius, there's other major cities. In a 3 or 4 hour radius, there's 30,000 person towns. There's 70,000 person towns. Like there's great towns that you can go and build business in. And you could do, and again, this isn't to duplicate ESO, which we teach that too, but we talk about the ink blot model. And the ink blot model is what Walmart did. Walmart put a store somewhere and they went to the very next town over and put another store because it made sense in their distribution. Kmart did it the opposite. Now, What Kmart did was they went major metro, major metro, major metro. And what it did was it wrecked them on delivery because they couldn't get their trucks out in time. Because from one store to another could be 12 hours or 10 hours. Walmart would just drive 45 minutes to the next town, 45 minutes to the next Walmart. Now, not saying that one's right, one's wrong, but one still exists and one doesn't. Isn't that interesting? Now, in part 2, though, of level 6, you have the director of ops, you have the director of sales. At this point, you have a director of expansion, not just an expansion agent. So it's a very, very similar business, but you're putting one more person between you and the expansion agent. I remember when I first started expanding in 2011, we were in a couple of cities. I always talked to the expansion agent. Of course, why wouldn't I? By 2012 and 2013, I was doing it less and less and less. At this point in my career, and I'm not always happy about this, but at this point in my career, it's not uncommon to be teaching somewhere. Well, it's really uncommon to be teaching somewhere because of COVID, but before COVID, it wasn't uncommon to be teaching somewhere and somebody walks up after class and they're talking with you and you're like, hey, great. Yeah, thanks for stopping, bye. And they go, hey, I'm on your team. And you go, oh, that's awesome. I mean, I think there's 162 in my group right now. There's no way I know all those people. Now, the ones that have been around a long time, of course, I know them. Though somebody might have joined us a month ago and it's not my job. Like I have a leader whose job is to take care of that person. And if it's me, then why is the leader working, right? All right, so 7th level. This is where you truly begin to replace yourself. This is where you spend the majority of your time on vision. This is where you spend the majority of your time on accountability to growth and standards. This is where you're going to wonder who you are because you're not in the deals. You're going to wonder, like, what are you doing every day? And you're going to wonder, how is it I'm so busy all the time? Like, this is where I live right now. And this is where I go, man, I'm not even sure what I'm doing half the time, but I know I'm always busy. You look at this, and at this point, you bring in somebody who might be a CEO, which of course you'll see on the screen. There's some states and some real estate rules in some areas that don't let you use like C-suite terms, which I think is ridiculous. I don't think it's anybody's business but yours. However, I don't get to make the rules, so we got to live by them sometimes. There's some areas that you can't use CEO in your board. I think that's ridiculous, but it's true. You would just use a different term. But this is where you hire somebody and all of a sudden that person becomes the CEO of the business, or that person becomes the director of sales at that higher level, or director of expansion, or whatever it is that you want to call it, right? And so this is where at this point you've got director of expansion and you have multiple expansion businesses. There is no reason, and let me say it this way. You do not have to build and go to expansion. You don't have to expand. However, if you're going to hit level 5, there's no reason not to. Like, to me, that's the break point. By the way, you could run a level 4 business, especially step 2 of level 4, make 800 grand, make $1 million, make 2 million. It's awesome. But if you go to level 5, I don't know why you wouldn't go all the way here and do expansion as well. There's no good reason not to. And by the way, if you're going to go to level 5, you're going to have really good people that look at you that are like, hey, where's my opportunity? Where's mine? I see you doing amazing. Where's mine? Like, I see you making great money, but mine's limited. I can only make 200 grand with you, which is awesome. But I can only make 200 and I'm going to outgrow it and have to leave you. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my best person, which is why you have to be willing to dream so big and build so big they can live their lives in it. So again, that's just my opinion. If you go to level 5, you should go all the way to level 7 and expand, because it won't be you doing it. It might be you driving it, but you driving it and you doing it aren't the same thing. But if you go to level 5, you might as well go to level 7. All right. The 5th model of expansion. This one we'll cruise through real quick. There's the expansion hub. You've got a lead gen system, admin team and systems. This is where you stand on lead generation. This is where you stand on the levers of lead gen, where you stand on administration. Trust me, administration and operations are going to drive this whole thing. Now, I'm a salesperson. And so I'm a salesperson through and through. I would love to tell you that it's always salespeople that make everything happen. That's only truthy. When you run businesses, you realize really fast that salespeople make the money happen. That's true. But the operations, The administrators, they're the backbone of the business, because those salespeople, I mean, let's call us who we are, right? Like I are one. We get a little weird sometimes. We have good months and bad months. We have challenges and issues. We get depressed for a few weeks. We're usually cut from a pretty similar cloth. Like we get weird sometimes. We might get weird and leave the business. We might get weird and leave the team. Like there's 100 reasons. But the administrators, the operators, you build your entire defense on them. Like they're the ones that build the business. All right, so at the bottom, you have listing leads and agents, you have listing leads and agents, you have listing leads and agents. And the biggest challenge that we have in expansion is that people go and expand, one, before they should, two, before they have leads to assign, before they have systems to assign. You don't have to do both of them, but you better do one of them really, really, really well. Otherwise, what are you expanding with? And again, the easiest way to do it is for your business to get to the point where you're selling 200 or 300 homes or 400 homes in your main metro area. And you go, all right, for me to go from 400 units to 500 units is really hard. However, for me to pick up 100 units in the town next door would be easier than an additional 100 units where I live. That's why you should go and expand. That would be reason one. Reason two is you look down and you go, I've got really good people and everyone's working hard. We're all doing well, but my really good people don't have their next. And what I mean by that is they don't have their next opportunity. And if they don't have their next opportunity with you, they're not going to stay with you, which is going to put the gun to your head to go, all right, I got to go build something bigger, or make peace with losing your best people. Because your best people you might look down and go, they've got a bigger appetite than me, which means they're going to leave. So be careful with that. That would be why you should expand. In the organizational model, what you'll do is after we're done today, I won't do the 2-minute break because we're getting close to when we're going to be done anyway. This is where you'll build your business plan. And the easiest way to do it is a current organizational plan. And you'll say, great, here's where I'm at. It's always going to be you. You ever go and play bingo and you'll admit it? In the middle of the card, there's like a free space. We gave you a free space here, right? Like we already filled it out for you. There's you. And then from there, like who else is in the business? Now, if I'm you, I'm going to build 2 organizational charts. I'm going to build the organizational chart as it stands today. I'm also going to build the organizational chart as to how I wish it stood today. Like what jobs or functions or roles do I really need that I haven't done yet? But they're both today. Then I'm going to build one for 2021. But when I build one for 2021, remember, you've already heard me say this, I'm overlaying my 2024 or 2025 over it. And I won't look at 2021 without looking at 2024 or 2025, because one begets the other. This is the one that I'm after. This is the one I have to do to get to this one. So I think that you should quit looking at life of, hey, what happens next year? And we should really look what happens 4 years from now. Now, then what happens next year to get there? But one's just a stepping stone to the next. All right, pulling it all together. We'd love you to take a moment to complete an evaluation. You can open Kelly. You can type or say, take the course evaluation, tap the link, select the course, select the instructor. We'd love for you to share your feedback. And of course, this is the business planning clinic. So we'd love to get your feedback. Lacey, if you can get me out of PowerPoint. Before I do that though, so remember, Kelly, that's the easiest way to do it. Type or say course evaluation, grab the link. We'd love your feedback. All right, so if you'll take me out of this. All right, perfect, great. So I'm going to leave you with a handful of ideas at the end. Number one, your plan does not have to be perfect. It just has to be the plan that you use. In the lack of the right plan, any plan will do. So live with that for a while. Be willing to go back and look at it. Be willing to go back and change it. If it's not the plan that you want, then be willing to squash it. Be willing to say, listen, I did this wrong. I'm going to redo it. There's nothing wrong with that. I can't tell you how many times I've built a business plan just to come back and be like, well, that was dumb. Like there's no reason to do it that way. That was ridiculous. Well, cool. Squash it, start over, do it a different way. Another idea I'm going to leave you with is this. I want you to think about the money that you're spending currently. And when you think about the budget model, I want you to think, where should you be spending next year? And I'm going to tell you, one of the biggest places that agents underspend is in lead generation. We don't spend the money in lead gen. Like there's a really good rule of thumb of like 10 to 12% just in lead generation. And the typical agent who makes $200,000 a year is usually not spending 20 grand in lead gen. The agent who makes a couple hundred grand is usually spending like 5 or 6 grand a year in lead gen. They're not spending enough. Now, sometimes people they overspend, right? But most of us overspend on things we shouldn't, and we underspend on things we should. And so I'm going to tell you, you should build the budget and then go back and go, all right, so if I'm going to spend 25 grand next year in lead gen, where would it go? What would I do with it? Your best bet, this is my opinion, just my opinion, your best bet for bang on buck or return on investment is going to be internet lead generation. That's going to be the best return of investment on lead gen dollars spent. Nothing wrong with farming, nothing wrong with cards and mailers and letters and all those things. But if you're just going to spend dollar for dollar, your best bet is to use Command or whatever CRM you're using, whatever system you're using, whatever you're buying stuff from. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, you've already got Command, so you're ridiculous not to use it. I get that. But I've got some friends that are running internet lead gen through Command in some cities for as low as $2 or $3 a registration. That's incredibly inexpensive. And then from there, what can you do with it? That's going to usually be your best ROI. Most of us that end up on stage who have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions a year, almost all of us have a really strong internet lead generation arm. It's not our only arm. In fact, for me, when I was building my business, there was a few years it was my only arm. I mean, there was always something else, but it was the biggest by far. And I knew it wasn't okay, but I had to live there for a while. And that's okay too, but it's going to be a good return on investment. So if you're going to spend some money next year, make sure you're spending it in internet lead gen. Like there's a reason it works, right? And there's only two things you need to know there. And that's going to be CPL and PPC, cost per lead and pay per click. What are you paying for someone to click? And then what are you paying every time somebody registers on your site? That becomes a registration cost per lead, CPL. And then it becomes, right, how much can I buy? How many do I need? Where you're going to buy, name not on list for instructor. All right, so Lacey, if you'll grab that, I'm like a dog, and I go squirrel, and I see that, and I start reading. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, which is completely fine. Another way to spend money is going to be on data. Like you've got to have data. One of the places that I buy data from is LandVoice. You can buy it wherever you want. There's lots of options out there, but LandVoice is where I buy data from in all 96 cities that we sell in. Check them out on landvoice.com. They've always got some type of promo going. Lacey will drop a link in there that'll be my name, and they'll give you whatever their best promo pricing is. Again, I don't make anything from it, but I've told them, you know, all these vendors I work with, I say, listen, if I'm going to use your name, number one, it better work. Number two, if I send someone to you, you better give them a deal. They better get a deal from it. That's like I insist on it. Likely.ai, another one. Check those guys out. The last one I'm going to talk to you about is signs. Like signs matter. Signs are important. And signs have gotten ridiculous expensive somehow. We looked down last year and we were spending $35,000 last year in signs. Now, high class problem. Like you got to have a lot of for sale signs to be in 96 cities, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to drop a link in here for a friend of mine who owns a sign company in Alaska, which seems a little bit ridiculous, though shipping costs today is not what it used to be. And he can drop ship from Alaska cheaper than most places can from somewhere else in the US. His turn times are great. His pricing is great. He's someone I've known for 15 years. He was an agent first. I recruited him to KW when I was a team leader. And then ultimately he opened up a sign business as an agent. So he understands, but his pricing is great. We moved all of our signs to him. I mean, those are just the things that when you're still an agent, like I am, like you still think I got to have signs. Like these are still the things that actually just have to happen. Like it'd be fun just to wax and wane philosophical all the time, but I actually have to have signs too. Like I've got to do those things. And so he'd be another great one for you to check out, and he'll give you a great discount and do a great job for you. Very fast, very affordable. We moved all of ours to him. I'll leave you with this thought. Like COVID's been weird, right? Like everything's a little bit different and everybody has a different opinion on it and everything is fine. I'm good with everybody. I'm at the point now where it's like, if someone says ABC, I just go, yes. If they go ABC, I go, yes. Like I'm good with both. Like I don't argue. I just choose not to argue. One of the things I want you to think about is this though. There's so much hope right now around 2021, which is awesome. Like I love that. I live on hope. At the same time, We have no idea. Like, it's not just gonna, the clock just doesn't strike midnight on December 31st and poof, all of these challenges go away. Gary made the comment the other day. He said 28 million people in July skipped a mortgage payment or a rent payment. 28 million in the US. That's a really, really big deal. Now, some of those were just wrapping up their second or third month of forbearance, right? And we don't know what that's going to end up meaning, but there's a lot of thought around what that means in 3 months or 4 months. The market feels amazing right now. The market is fast right now, which is awesome. But you never prepare for the market you're in. That's a mistake. It's a rookie mistake. You only prepare for the market you're going to. That's where I want you to be as a professional. Now, you're going to build out this business plan. You're going to use real numbers. You're going to use the numbers that we gave you. And if you do better than that, and the market stays incredibly fast and everything is incredibly quick next year, by the way, most of us will tell you as an agent, I don't like when the market is this fast. It hurts my business when the market is this fast. And the biggest reason for it is I don't have any time with my listings. The damn things are selling in a matter of days or a week or two. I don't have any time. When I have a month with them or 2 months with them, easier to earn referrals, easier to show them how good of a job I do, easier to find buyers who are, who are looking for homes. Like, that's all really good. When things are this fast, it's not my favorite market. It's my hardest market as a real estate agent, but it's the market we're in. Remember, if you're worried about money, prospecting based, don't do a bunch of marketing. If you've got some money and you're struggling with time, do some marketing to buy your time back. Nothing wrong with that. There's a hire that everybody in here needs to make, and that hire should be a coach. Don't work alone. No one succeeds at their highest level by themselves. They just don't. We know it. You know it. Everybody knows it. Just walk down that path. And I talked to someone the other day. They said, you know what? I had a coach once and it didn't work. Well, you know what? I went to the bathroom once and it didn't work. I still go back. You can't have fun and laugh at yourself. But yeah, go hire a coach. That doesn't mean it won't work next time. One of the biggest challenges that we have in real estate is someone says, hey, I tried that and it didn't work. So what? Maybe you didn't do it right. Lots of things don't work once or twice. Remember this, and I'll leave you with this final thought. Everybody gets to the top of the mountain the same way. Nobody wakes up there. Nobody wakes up and they're like, wow, how did I get here? You've never heard an interview with Oprah where someone goes, you know what, Opes? That's why they won't invite me on the show. I'm certain of it. You know what, Opes? It was easy. It took me less time than I thought. And it was simple. It took me less money than I thought. And it was fast. Success was easy. No one's ever told that story. And if they did, they wouldn't put it on TV because nobody wants to hear that. The truth is, everybody gets to the top of their mountain the same way. Scratching, clawing, falling down, hurting, wondering what the hell they're even doing climbing this mountain right now, getting back up tomorrow and doing it again. So when you find yourself doing that, just know you're probably doing it the right way. There's probably no other way. And if you're unwilling to, or you don't want to, I need you to hear me on this. Maybe you chose the wrong mountain. Find something that you are so incredibly attached to and so passionate about that you don't know how not to wake up and climb. Pick that thing. The challenge is some of you wound up in real estate because something else didn't work and you always thought real estate sounded cool. But that doesn't exhibit passion. I need you to be passionate about this if you're going to do it. And if you're going to do it big, it's going to take passion. It's not going to take willingness. It's going to take passion. Something that draws you through the challenge. All right. I hope that you've enjoyed this. If we haven't connected yet on social media, I'm Cody Gibson 1 on Instagram. Of course, just Cody Gibson on Facebook. I'd love to connect with you there. I did finish up a couple of weeks ago my first ebook, which is 7 Steps to 10 Listings. If you haven't checked it out, go check that out. You can go to the website, 7stepsto10listings.com. It's totally free. You can download. Many of you have even gone to the class with us. We've taught it. I mean, it's been through, gosh, I think 15,000 or 20,000 people already. But anyway, 7 Steps to 10 Listings. Grab the ebook. It's free. Love to have you there. I hope that you've enjoyed today. If you took something from this, do me a favor, because we can't see each other, throw it on social media. Say something you learned, say something you heard. If you use my name, great. Tag me in it. If you don't, great. That's cool too. But this is where I got to spend some time with about 600 or 700 of you total. But if you all say something on social media, maybe 1,000 people see it. And all of a sudden, somebody else learned something and you became the conduit of it. Plus, it allows me as an instructor to look and go, okay, cool. Here's what they learned or here's what they saw. In person, we could do it in the room and it looks different. It's been my pleasure to be here with you. I hope you've taken something from this and I hope you put it to use. If I can help you, drop me a line. We get through this thing together. My email, codygibson@kw.com. I gave you my Instagram, Cody Gibson1. You've got Facebook. My mobile is 907-529-5172. I never used to hand that out before, but 907-529-5172. The truth is, there's a whole bunch of our people right now that are hurting. COVID's been tough. Like, it's been hard. And if something's challenging, like, we all get through this together at KW. We get through it together or we don't go. And so if you need to shoot me a text or say something, man, I'm in. Let me know. 907-529-5172. All right. Otherwise, Lacey's giving me the you're done look. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. Let us know what you think. Have an amazing day. Thank you for being here. Your region is awesome. It's one of the best we have. All right. Have an amazing day.